Groundhog, 3rd of February of 2025. A red letter, breaking news, benchmark, wait for it day. Okay?
Do I need to hit the sounder?
You can. But here's the thing. On this February 3rd, on this, the start of the week of the NBA trade deadline, on this, the start of the Super Bowl week, on this, the day of my sister's birthday.
Happy birthday, Jake's sister.
Megan Query Roth, if you know her. And now, is it uncouth if I say her age?
You're not supposed to say a woman's age, Jake, so yes.
She's my sister, though.
So?
Double nickel. Double nickel. So happy birthday to her. None of those are the reason for the breaking news. It's not breaking news because it feels like forever ago, but it was just a couple of days ago that Indiana and Purdue played, and now we talk about where they go from here. It's not breaking news because one of the biggest trades happened in the NBA. It's not breaking news because that trade could have implications on the Indiana Pacers. It's not breaking news because, as I mentioned, the Super Bowl is coming up this week, and Peyton Manning's son is throwing fade passes to Jamar Chase at the Pro Bowl. None of that's the breaking news. Eddie, if you could, the breaking news sounder, please. I'm standing in the studio, and I assume I do not stand alone in saying this. I did not bring a jacket to work today because 64 degrees by the end of the show today.
Had me thinking about Seattle.
Spring fever is here, baby. Spring fever is here. And it's going to last all of like 36 hours, so enjoy it while you can, right? But nonetheless, it is nice to have nice weather here in central Indiana. Good afternoon to you. My name is Jay Query. Eddie Garrison, the voice you just heard. It is Query & Company here on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. And let's begin with, and yes, I want to get into the Luka Doncic and Anthony Davis trade. Not because we do a local sports talk show. And, it was obviously late on Saturday night when that came out, and I, like everyone else, immediately said to myself, okay, did someone get hacked? And there were a lot of people like, this is the biggest trade ever. And I guess it is. I'll be honest, to me, it felt like a lateral movement. Because does Luka Doncic put the Lakers into championship level category? I guess if he's healthy and invested, maybe. Does Anthony Davis put Dallas now into the upper stratosphere? I mean, he's an older player and he's injury prone. There are question marks for both guys that you are trading one player's health question mark and age question mark for another player's physical shape and total investment question mark, and now maybe whether or not he'll resent that Luka was denied the Supermax offer and, the taxes. There's all kinds of implications to it. But it does have rippling effect. When they have, Eddie, you'll hear about an earthquake that happens in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, and when it happens, it's like Hawaii's on a tsunami alert because eventually the waves get to the coast from happening in the earthquake.
Yeah.
There is a chance that this seismic earthquake that took place between Dallas and Los Angeles could have a ripple effect of a tsunami here in Indianapolis. I don't think that's going to be the case, but we'll explain what we mean by that. But let's begin with what took place on Friday night because it's the first chance that we have had a chance to talk to you folks since then. Hope you had a wonderful weekend. In Mackey, Purdue and Indiana. I said going in, I don't recall if I said it how specifically on this station. I know in talking to people for certain, I absolutely said that I thought Purdue would win by 7. I did not think that Indiana was going to get run out of the gym the way that people anticipated or that you heard a lot of people saying was going to happen. Look, I use recipe and Purdue's recipe. I think Purdue has a more defined structure of the way they want to do things, and they have a more versatile ability to score and be effective in their offense. And what I mean by that is Purdue can use Trey Kaufman-Renn and go to that variable, but they don't have to rely on their low post game if they can't get that going or if there's foul trouble or whatever it may be, because the straw mixing the drink is Braden Smith, who is the best point guard in college basketball and a floor general and hits timely shots, but he just dictates pace and sets precedent of how they're going to play, and so much of that is based on his offensive aggressiveness, which I thought he showed against Indiana. Indiana, on the other hand, the one consistent for them would be, and I think we're starting to learn more, that when they have two bigs on the floor at the same time between Reneau and Ballo, that they're almost better off with just one big at a time. And Ballo is, kind of a movable force. But if Ballo's not going or if they got to get away from that, then it's a matter of, and I think where Indiana has erred a little bit is in finding and sticking with the hot hand. Because, for example, Mbako is a guy that can score in very quick fashion, but they got away from that. And when he gets hot, I think you just got to keep going to him until he tapers off. But that game to me, do you credit? I guess what I'm asking is this, Eddie: do you credit Indiana for keeping it close, or do you look at it and say it doesn't matter? Indiana is not in the business right now of moral victories. Indiana's got to win games, and they got to win games that are quad one games, and Purdue is one of the 10, 12 best teams in the country, and they missed out on a chance when it was there for them.
I sit in the side of it was a missed opportunity for Indiana because they had the lead late. They had a chance to hold on and get a signature win on the road at Mackey Arena, and they didn't get it done. And now they have to respond and question if they can beat good teams still, because they put together one of, if not their best performance of the season. And now they have to go on the road tomorrow at Wisconsin.
House of Horrors, right?
Where they haven't won since 1998, prior to when I was born earlier in the year in like January of 98. And they have a Michigan team who's kind of on the downhill a little bit. Michigan State just lost to USC over the weekend. They have to go to East Lansing for that game. They have Purdue at home again. And then they have to go to Oregon later in the year. So most of the difficult games for Indiana are on the road. And if you can't close out at Purdue, then it's only going to raise more questions about a team. Can you get it done against a team that's not your rival, because you're more amped up for Purdue than you would be a Wisconsin, a UCLA, Michigan State?
Two other observations from that game, by the way, and one of them's obvious, but Fletcher Lawyer that's a guy that, and I know that he doesn't, he didn't shoot the ball particularly well in that game, but his combination of, if you look at, and he was such a good player, right out of the womb at Purdue, but now that he's bulked up a little bit and obviously has, when I say stamina, I don't mean long game stamina, 30-plus more minutes stamina. I mean over the course of the year. I think earlier in his career, he is a guy that kind of petered out towards the end of the year just because he'd been kind of run through the ringer. He's such an important piece for Purdue because you have to respect where he is at all times. Mbako's the same way, except for that Indiana kind of forgets Mbako and he gets in foul trouble. Lawyer, when he's on the floor, is spacing it at all times, and that opens things up for everybody else, notably Smith. And then, obviously, to get the ball into Renn. On the Indiana side of things, the other thing I noticed, late in that game, and maybe I'm alone here, I think I might be on an island here, okay? Am I the only one? Am I the only one that thinks to myself, was Rice on that last play, is Rice trying to shoot the ball and play hero the way IU fans are ridiculously sliding into his DMs to accuse him of? Or was Rice trying to feed Ballo and there was a miscommunication there, and that's why Ballo lost his mind at the end of the game? Was that a pass or a shot?
Well, that was without a doubt a shot.
Think so?
Yeah.
I don't know, man. The more I look at it, the more I think it's possible.
Did you agree with Mike Woodson's decision to not call the timeout? Because a week ago against Maryland on this show, we were talking about and questioning why he did when Indiana had the fast break and a chance to go up because Maryland was scrambling to get back.
I mean, it's kind of damned if you do and damned if you don't in that regard, right? I know this, and it's not the end-all, be-all, and it's not the thing that everything should be compared. But the reality is this. Bob Knight, in his coaching style, always used to pride himself on not having to call timeout late in the game. Very seldomly did Indiana call a timeout late in the game. Derek Coleman misses the shot. Indiana gets the rebound, hands it off to Alford to come up the floor. No timeout called. They run their play. Glenn Rice misses a shot. Rice or Sean Higgins, I think it was Rice, misses the shot. Lyndon Jones gets the rebound. No timeout called. Indiana rushes up the floor. Jay Edwards wins the ballgame. That's the night when Knight was the head coach. His mentality always was, I don't need to call timeouts late in the game because my team is better prepared than the other team. And that at any point in the game, it is my belief that my team has a better understanding of the game, a better knowledge of the game, and a better execution of the game than the opponent. At any point in the game, the one thing I know is that through preparation, that my team has an advantage over the other team. And more often than not, that probably was accurate when Knight was coaching. The reason I say that is because, obviously, Mike Woodson played under Bob Knight and for 4 years would have had that ingrained in himself as a player that we don't need to call a timeout because if we do, that's allowing the opponent to rise to our level of preparation. We should be composed for the moment. We should embrace the moment. And now, did he do that in the Maryland game? He did not. And then all hell broke loose, right? This time you go with it. So you're a little damned if you do and damned if you don't. If that was a shot from Rice, it wasn't the worst of shots. It just was peculiar why you would go there and whether that's a player going rogue or whether everything else just broke down when there are other guys on the floor who have been able to make shots. What really hurts Indiana, and maybe this is credit Purdue, is that Indiana was just unable to execute in that last 2 minute, last whatever possession again to the precision that you need. And a lot of that may be on just Purdue's preparedness and Purdue's ability to defend. I thought Purdue was outstanding in matching each time Indiana made a run. Now, they're at home, and that helps. But you get down, you're in a rivalry game like that, you get down 6, you get down 7, then you've got to respond to that. And I thought each time that Indiana, because Indiana had a couple of runs there, right, where they were up, and you're thinking, holy cow. And the longer you go in that, the more you can take the crowd out of the building. And I thought Purdue responded well each time.
Yeah, they did, and usually centered around Braden Smith making a play or Trey Kaufman-Renn, who was fantastic in that second half. I think he had 15 points in the second half, finished with 23 points. Braden Smith was just making plays all night long, 24-7. And they got some timely buckets from Fletcher Lawyer. I know Caleb First didn't score, didn't take a shot, but his energy and his effort, I think, made a real impact on that game when Trey Kaufman-Renn got in foul trouble. And so did, Caleb was in foul trouble himself. He was dealing with that all night long. But from the Indiana side of it, I thought Miles Rice was just trying to play hero ball. Like, I didn't agree with it at the time. I think it should have been a players over plays. Their play may have been the right move to rush it up the floor, but I think that's got to be Trey Galloway or trying to get the ball to Luke Goody or
Galloway
Mbako.
had a good game.
Yeah.
Galloway had a good game. And Galloway, for his age, should be more consistent than he is. But Galloway had a good game. Now, can we stop with DMing players after games and, like, telling them how worthless they are?
Oh, and I didn't think that was a foul, by the way, either on Jakari Harris. I thought it was great defense.
I would agree with that. I would agree that was he was straight up, good defensive play, right?
Mm-hmm.
The following DM was sent to Miles Rice. For those kids in the back, DM would be direct message. I think this is on
Look at you, Jake.
Instagram. Thank you. Blank, blank, blank.
I think they call it Insta.
Sorry. This is what somebody is writing to Miles Rice. I'm Miles Rice. My teammates worked so hard to get this game close, and I'm going to play hero ball with 10 seconds left in hopes I make this game all about me. You blankety blank, painting your nails and making TikToks. This isn't blanking Washington State, you blank. People actually give a blank about the product you're helping, quote, build. Literally go hang yourself. I hope you never smile again, you blankety blank.
Good grief.
You know how many people care about IU basketball? Your selfish blank can't comprehend team play. 0 points, and you say, I got to make a bucket. Not the blanking time with 10 seconds left, you selfish blank. Go kill yourself and kill anybody you love, you worthless piece of blank.
Holy crud.
Now, you want to know, in today's era, and this is a whole different can of worms, but in today's era, when every guy, and I'm generalizing here, I don't know who sent that, but when every guy on a campus under the age of like 25, 22, 20 years old has a sports gambling app and everything else, that stuff right there is concerning, but it's prevalent. It is. And certain fan bases have such an emotional investment in the outcome of the game, and oftentimes now a financial investment in the outcome of a game, that they go too far and they cross lines. And they send stuff like that because people now feel between, this is the problem. Old man yelling at clouds, I real back in my day. But it is a reality. We love sports. I love sports. Sports unifies the masses like no other. And 98 out of 100 people are able to do it responsibly and be great fans. But there's always those two. But those two can become a problem. When you now have NIL where people are contributing to fundraisers to pay players, you have widespread gambling apps where people can recoup that money based on the performance of players. People feel that they have themselves an investment and a direct implication on the results of games. And it's one thing you could say till the cows come home. Yeah, but Jake, the guy that goes to a Colts game and sees Anthony Richardson have a poor performance has to be upset because he paid $100 to go see Anthony Richardson play. True. But that guy also knows that there are 52 players on that field. There are a number of things paying the salary. There's television rights, and there's sponsorships and everything else. But when a guy goes, and I won't even single out Indiana here. I'll just name a random university of the Green Hill State. Green Hill State University. Green Hill State University, there's a guy that's a banker living just outside campus of Green Hill State University, and they are in pursuit of a point guard because everybody thinks a point guard might be the one that finally sends them over the top and gets them to win their conference and get into the NCAA tournament, and what a coup that would be for Green Hill State. So this guy says, you know what do I need to do? And the athletic department says, there's this new thing called NIL, and this point guard, we think we can get him, but unfortunately, Blue Valley is offering $500,000. So this guy says, you know what? I want to see Green Hill State go to the tournament. I went to school there. My daughter goes to school there. I met my wife there. I'll write you a check right now for $600,000. Get that kid to come here. That kid comes and then has a bad game against Blue Valley in the conference championship. That guy now all of a sudden says, I gave that kid money to get me where I want my team to go. And things like that are only going to get worse. You're only going to see more of it. And it's something that has to be navigated through because we're not talking about professionals that have security, people and all those within a league, but you're talking about the college atmosphere, the college environment, and theoretically, kids that are then having to the next day go on campus and blend in and sit in the back of a lecture hall with 20 guys, 10 of which might have felt like they are the ones that lost them money on a gambling app. I'm telling you, it's a whole different ball of wax. Now, the other thing, as I mentioned, that we're going to talk about, and Don Fischer are going to join us just about 10 minutes from now. We'll get back into Indiana and their performance against Purdue, their upcoming game against Wisconsin, and then what might be kind of an odd night with Michigan and Dusty May coming into town. But the big story over the weekend in sports is that of Luka Doncic and Anthony Davis and that trade. And here is the reality. Because you look at it and you say, why in the world would Dallas trade Luka Doncic? He's 25 years old, and they just traded him for 32-year-old Anthony Davis. But keep this in mind. All of us know somebody. All of us know a married couple, or your buddy that's got a wonderful girlfriend, or your girlfriend that has a really good guy she's dating, whatever it may be, that feels perfect. I remember when I was in the third grade, and one of my best friends told us at school one day that his parents were getting divorced. And I don't know that I truly understood what that meant at that age, but his house was so fun to go to, and it was always so upbeat, and everybody was so fun, and both of his parents were so much fun. His birthday parties were great. And I remember saying to my mom, how are they getting divorced? Like, they're always so much fun. And my mom said, Jake, you just never know what goes on behind closed doors. And in the case of Luka Doncic and the divorce, for lack of a better phrase, from the Dallas Mavericks, on a day when the Mavericks had sent out like a post on social media of Doncic getting out of a car with a cowboy hat, and it was like Texas Appreciation Day or something like that. But the reality is this. You never know what goes on behind closed doors. And Doncic was up for a supermax. He had gotten up to 270 pounds. And quite frankly, as I said, to me, it wasn't about Dallas worrying about the money. It was about Dallas deciding that they had to trim the fat. Because I think they had legitimate concern about Doncic's commitment to staying in shape. And look, it's one thing to be 21, 22 years old and have a little bit of fat on you, but then, and I don't mean this, I'm not trying to fat shame the guy at all. But if you're that age and you're playing a professional sport and you are starting to show a tendency to put weight on, we've all seen athletes in the past that all of a sudden their weight becomes a hindrance towards their performance. And I think this has been a topic for the Mavs for a while. And I think it just got to the point no one knows behind closed doors what was going on in terms of the efforts to get him in shape, to get him regularly on the floor, to get him playing at a higher level, whatever it might be. No one knows what the dynamics were. Now, clearly, Doncic said the right things on the way out, so I don't think it was a truly ugly situation, but it also could be one that they knew he wasn't going to resign. There's any number of things that come into it. The bigger surprise might be that the Lakers decided to part ways with Anthony Davis, although if you're the Lakers, you're saying to yourself, well, we're getting a guy that's 7 years younger, even more effective a player, and we're going to assume in Los Angeles, where it's a lot easier, not that it's, but think about this, L.A. What's the lifestyle in Dallas in terms of food?
Yeah, you're getting a lot of meals, bigger meals. Right,
but and I mean, I'm being a little facetious, but the lifestyle in Texas is that of like, you know what I mean? Big steaks and big dinners, whatever. You go to L.A., everything is centered around eating like lighter salads and rollerblading on, and nobody rollerblades, I realize, but being out and about. And I mean, literally, the one thing about there is it is a lifestyle that is more conducive towards that. Maybe the Lakers just feel like, because everybody thinks this, everybody. Hey, did you hear what? Larry's got a new girlfriend. Really? Dude, she is so hot. Unbelievable. Really? Yeah. Her last boyfriend broke up with her. Why? Well, she's a little bit crazy. Yeah, but Larry's going to calm her down. And I don't mean crazy like she's like running around, talking to herself. I mean just she's a wild girl, party girl. Yeah, but Larry's the one that's going to settle her down. Did you hear what? Sally's got a new boyfriend. Really? Yep. Which one? Kenny. You might have seen him at the gym. Kenny? That dude's like all over the place. He's going out with a different girl every night. I know, but Sally thinks she's the one that's going to calm him down. She's going to tame him. It's natural. It's a natural thought that you're going to be the one to put somebody in the position. And the Lakers clearly think that with Doncic. The bigger question becomes this. Now that Anthony Davis is out, now that Luka Doncic is in L.A., now that you only have a few years left of LeBron James and he's got a guy and a running mate that he wanted to run with in the form of Luka Doncic, one thing the Lakers are missing that the Lakers are now on record of saying is we would like a rim-protecting big. And the rim protecting big that has been more linked to the Los Angeles Lakers than any non-Laker of the last 5 to 7 years is right here in Indiana. And I don't in any way, shape, or form think the Pacers are going to trade Miles Turner to the Lakers. I'm here to tell you right now, I don't think that the Indiana Pacers are going to initiate a trade with the Los Angeles Lakers to send Miles Turner to L.A. and to fulfill L.A.'s request for rim protecting big. Unless one caveat is real. And I'll tell you what that is in about 15, but we're going to get back into Indiana Purdue with the voice of the Hoosiers, Don Fischer, on this Monday Springfield edition. Query & Company next. Halfway through the 12 o'clock hour on a Monday that feels like Selection Sunday was yesterday, because I don't know if you've heard this or not, but now they're saying 82 degrees today it's going to hit.
What?
Not really. But isn't it crazy, though, how 40 degrees feels differently in February than it does in October?
60 is going to feel like 90.
I mean, yesterday I was like, let's just go. Don Fischer probably golfed, right? Like, let's go. Go to the academy, hit some balls. Don Fischer joins us now on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest Line, the radio voice, play-by-play voice of the Indiana Hoosiers. Don, it's starting to feel like golf season, isn't it?
It does. I walked out there to get the mail a little while ago, and I went, I should be out today.
You ended up getting all the neighbors' mail too, right?
No, I didn't get anybody's mail except the mailman hadn't come yet, so it was disappointing in that regard.
No, listen, Don. And I'm here with you on this, okay? You have this epiphany at some point in your life where you go, I don't know what it says about me, but the mail coming is one of the more exciting aspects of my day-to-day operation, right?
Well, it gives you some idea of how old I am. It's that exciting.
That's right. All right, let's get back to what, and it does feel like, admittedly, 2.5 weeks ago, but it was just a couple nights ago in Mackey Arena. I thought, and Don, we're not in the point in the year where you can bank on moral victories. But I did think for a lot of people that had written off Indiana, and for as talented and as well-coached as Purdue is, which they are, I thought it was a solid performance from Indiana overall, just one of those where in the last couple minutes they couldn't close. But your overall observation of it?
Well, I thought it was the best performance they've had this year against anybody, especially a quality team like Purdue. I don't think there's any question they played them toe-to-toe right up till the end. Unfortunately, they turned the ball over 20 times, which pretty much nullifies anything good that they were trying to do throughout the ball game, because Purdue scored 26 points off those turnovers. Indiana shoots 57% in the ball game. Purdue shoots 53%. It was a terrific basketball game. You didn't care who won, but Hoosier fans obviously do, as do the Boilermaker fans, and obviously Purdue was able to pull it out. But mistakes at the end, again, was a very costly factor in this ball game.
One of the guys, Don, to me that is the most intriguing, and I think, I was listening to the broadcast, I was listening to your call, and I know that you also had noticed, because you pointed it out at one point, how hot he can get so quickly. But when Mackenzie Mbako has it going, there are a few guys that I've seen that can catch lightning in a bottle like that. But he kind of has to get into rhythm for it to happen. Does Indiana need to find a way schematically to get him more looks, or is it just a matter of, in other words, is he getting the necessary number of open shots and looks, or is it a matter maybe even of Mbako getting himself in that position versus the offense setting him up for it?
Well, I think it's a combination of the two, to be honest with you, Jake, because Mackenzie had 4 straight ball games leading up to the last 3 that were just pitiful. I mean, he was 0 for 15 in 3-point shots. He was 4 of 29 from the field. He was seeing fewer and fewer minutes because he wasn't playing very well at either end of the floor. So, and Mackenzie is one of those guys that when he does get it going a little bit, he can really get it going. And he has played the best basketball he's played this season outside of early on against lesser teams, but he has played his best in the last 3 ball games. He shot 40% in the last 3 games from the 3-point line and 58% from the field. He's also pulled down 5 rebounds in each of the last 3 ball games, and he's averaging 20 points a game in those 3. So he's capable. The question on him is whether or not he's always engaged, if you know what I mean. He struggles with that sometimes. And in that 4-game stretch where he didn't do anything, I mean, obviously Mike couldn't play him because he just wasn't involved in anything but maybe shooting the basketball, and it wasn't going in.
And, Don, I mean, obviously now, this is not high school basketball, right? Like, it's up to a guy to get himself engaged in terms of just the headspace of it, right? I mean, it's not up to the teammates to get him engaged. And I think sometimes that's the challenge. You just don't know about guys, right? I mean, as gifted somebody might be athletically, you just don't know sometimes. And I'm not saying that as a knock on him, right? But, like, there are some guys that just have tendency to check out from time to time, right?
There's no doubt. I mean, there are guys who are streaky in that regard, and I'm talking about from a focus perspective,
right?
Because we've seen that through the years with a number of different players. I'm not going to mention names at this point; that doesn't do any good. But yet, again, when you've been doing it as long as I have, you've seen guys that were engaged all the time and guys that were not, and the consistency of that is a critical thing to any basketball team. And if you're going to be a player if you're going to be a really good player on a good basketball team, you have to be engaged. You have to have energy and effort every time you walk out on the floor. And honestly, McKenzie hasn't given us that in his 2 years at Indiana thus far. Now, granted, his last 3 games have been pretty good, and without question. But that needs to be a constant, and it's got to be consistent, and that's just where it has. And that's failed other guys, too. There's no doubt Miles Rice is in that category at this point. I mean, I don't think that he checks out. It's just that sometimes he just doesn't seem to be as focused or as engaged as he needs to be. And he certainly wasn't in the Purdue ball game, another game in which one of your best players doesn't have a point. And he had 1 assist in the ball game as the point guard. So, honestly, at this juncture, that's the one thing. And from a coaching perspective, that's got to drive you nuts. I mean, it just has to drive you crazy that a guy like him isn't as engaged as he needs to be. And even if he's having a bad ball game, you can do other things besides shoot the basketball and not turn it over. I mean, those kinds of things are critical when you're a point guard.
Is Oumar Ballo in that category, Don, in the fact that – or is he overly engaged? In other words, does he at times let his emotions get the best of him?
Well, I think we've seen that. I thought we saw it in the Purdue ball game, and I thought there was another game too, or maybe the Ohio State game where I can't remember exactly off the top of my head. But at any rate, I mean, I think here's the thing about Oumar Ballo. He played at Gonzaga for a year. I don't know how much he played, but he didn't play a ton. And he played at Arizona for 3 years. Nothing but winning program. Those 2 programs,
right,
as winning programs as you're going to be a part of. And he has done nothing but win throughout his career. And I think he's in a frustrated mode right now because this team is not winning. Because I think he works his tail off as hard as anybody in this ball club. And he has been, in my mind, the most consistent player on this basketball team this year. And he's leading the team in scoring. Obviously, he's the rebound leader in the Big Ten. He's a great talent. But I think he's as frustrated as anybody possibly could be under the circumstances of Indiana not being able to pull out wins at the end.
You know, Don, speaking of, Don Fischer is our guest. He's on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line. Coach's show tonight on this station. It is Terry Morin talking the women's side of things, correct, this week?
Yep, Austin Render will host.
Okay. And, Don, speaking about just engagement of players, you know, one guy that and I realize, maybe he doesn't have the overall basketball athleticism or skill of some of his peers, but a guy that to me is constantly engaged, and I like that they're now going to him more and more. Anthony Leal is a guy that just seemingly is magnetized towards making basketball plays. Is it important for them to continue to utilize him in late game situations down the stretch?
I don't think there's any question about that, because if there's anything about Anthony, it's not about stats. And you can look at his statistics, and they do not impress you. But he is a guy that really plays hard all the time. Effort is given every time he's out on the floor. He is obviously a positive influence from a defensive standpoint. He knows his responsibilities there. He works at it like crazy. He's probably not the greatest athlete on this basketball team, but he's not a bad athlete. And the other aspect of Anthony Leal, in my opinion, right now, is he's got to shoot the basketball more. I know he's a good scorer. He can score the basketball. I just don't think he takes enough shots. But he's more about team than he is about anything else. And on this team, that's a good thing.
By the way, Don, I know this will stun you, but considering that Shannon and I have dated now for 19 years, I get asked if I'm engaged like twice a week, for what it's worth.
Well, the fact that you just pointed out that you've been engaged, or that you've been dating Shannon for 19 years, is astounding in itself.
And you know her more so for her to tolerate that, right?
That is correct, sir.
Well, hey, you know what? We got a good thing going. That's the important thing, right, Don?
That's exactly right.
A 19-year winning streak. Don Fischer, the voice of the Hoosiers. Up next, it is. And let's face it, Don, great city, great fan base, great program, but, man, Madison, Wisconsin has been a nightmare of a town for Indiana over the course of those 19 years and more.
27 years since Indiana has beat Wisconsin in Madison.
Unbelievable.
The very first game they played in the Kohl Center was in 1998. It was a brand-new facility. Indiana won that game. They have not beaten Wisconsin in Madison since.
Unbelievable. Great town, no question, but a rough one for Indiana. We'll see if the streak ends tomorrow night. Again, Coach's show tonight with Terry Morin and Again, the Hoosiers in action tomorrow in Madison, and then back home on Saturday against Dusty May and the Wolverines of Michigan. Don, appreciate it as always. All right, enjoy Wisconsin.
You bet. Thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it. See you.
Don Fischer on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest Line. All right, other side, there was, by the way, speaking of the NBA trade deadline, a little blip that did involve Indiana in the trade deadline. Yes, in fact, Indiana was involved over the weekend. We will explain, and then Mac Engel, I texted Mac, he's the beat writer for the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. I have a very specific question for him in terms of how this might relate to the Indiana Pacers with this Doncic trade. He's going to join us 18 minutes from now. Now, Eddie, when you hear this song, you automatically think of what?
Oh, Fast Times at Ridgemont High, duh.
Did you watch it this weekend? Is that why you're playing it?
No. So at my part-time job over the weekend, this song came on, and I meant to text you as I heard it, and it's been stuck in my head for 2 days.
It is a good song, right? Now, you know that this is probably household information, common knowledge, if you will. And I've always known this too, but I always assumed that it was a more esoteric fun fact. And it's not a fun fact. It's a fact. It's certainly not fun. It's terrible. Jennifer Jason Leigh, who, of course, is Stacy in Fast Times at Ridgemont High. And if you ask me, Stacy's a very aggressive girl. That song plays each time that she's, getting busy. Now, she also was in a show that I think we might be the only people that watched it, called Atypical on Netflix, which I thought was just brilliant. And recently, she is married to Michael Rappaport in the show, fictionally. And maybe it was in that capacity I went back and looked at her, just her career in general. And I didn't realize that when Fast Times at Ridgemont High was being filmed, either immediately before that or immediately following it, I think it was just before that, her father was killed.
Oh, my goodness.
Her father was an actor, and he was killed in part of a prop accident during the filming of the movie The Twilight Zone. The Twilight Zone movie.
I would play the sounder, but that's dark.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I wonder how many people know the Twilight Zone movie that came out in like 82 had 4 different vignette, storylines, and I believe her father was supposed to be in the one that has, I think it's John Lithgow, that's on an airplane and sees an alien out on the wing, and they have all kinds of weird effects that take place, and I believe it was during the filming of that he was supposed to be involved in it, and they had a prop accident, and he unfortunately, was killed.
Way to damper my mood on this Monday, Jake. Thanks.
Okay, how about I try to lift your spirits back up?
Okay.
The mercury's rising outside. It's nearly 60 degrees today, right?
Yep.
The Mercury, one of the WNBA teams, and been one of the better ones, right?
Yeah.
But the team that is now not only taking players from there, but developing a roster that is going to be multiple number of all-stars on it, the Indiana Fever.
You missed out on an opportunity here, Jake.
Are you going to say because they just acquired a Fever player?
Yes, I was going to say you missed out on an opportunity. You say the mercury rises in a thermometer. Typically, the thermometer rises when you have a fever.
I was kind of going there with that, yes. Correct. But they now have the Fever do. They've made some moves here. Now, Nalissa Smith on her way out, but they have not one but 2 players on their way in. Correct, Eddie?
Yeah, they made it official 3 technically, Jake, today at least, with DeWanna Bonner signing with the Indiana Fever. 2-time champion. She is one of the best players in the W. And then last week, I think it was Friday, they signed Natasha Howard, who started her career with the Fever. And then, of course, that trade you just alluded to where it sent the 8th pick out and Nalissa Smith. The main player they got in return of that was Sophia Cunningham.
Now, to make room for that, they did release...
Sophia Cunningham, not Sophia.
They did release Grace Berger, the former Indiana player.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, what they are doing clearly, and I think that what you are seeing here is twofold. Number one, they are building players around Caitlin Clark, obviously. That is the straw mixing the drink. And Aaliyah Boston, don't forget about Aaliyah Boston in there as well. But so long as, Stephanie White is able to get these players to gel and conform together, you now have weapons essentially at every position. And depth there as well. But I think what you're seeing is that when you have great players on your roster or a great player on your roster, people want to come and play with it. And especially in the league like the WNBA where it's not like the NFL where there's 32 teams. I mean, it's not hard to turn things around quickly. We saw that a year ago. Now, they started out, I remember the first month or so because I was like everybody else. I had this brilliant and genius plan that I was going to buy season tickets for the Fever just as an investment, right? Because I thought, and I didn't do it. I didn't end up pulling the trigger on it. And then the first couple of weeks I thought, oh, well, yeah, I'm in the okay here because they're not playing very well and tickets aren't very expensive. And lo and behold, then it all came together. And they were a totally different team at the end of the year than the beginning of the year. And I know that going into the playoffs and having to go and play, and it was weird the way and wonky the way it was set up, the best of 3 and having to play 2 on the road, I'll bet they're not going to have to, barring injury, one would assume they are not going to have to deal with that again. I think that the next couple of years, again, they've got to gel together. but they clearly are pushing all in now, right?
Especially with the new CBA coming up next year. Tawana Bonner and Natasha Howard both on one-year deals. So it's pretty much a test run to see if Caitlin Clark can, lead a team to a WNBA championship. And now they're, I think, the co-favorites to win the W after the Bonner signing, and Caitlin Clark is second in MVP odds.
And then Caitlin Clark, if you want to know her effect, she goes back to Iowa for her jersey retirement and to go into their Ring of Honor or whatever they call it, and they knock off USC, who's fourth in the country, right?
And it was announced, too, I think this was Friday, maybe Saturday, they will be playing a game there at Iowa. The Fever will.
Speaking of games, I did see that they're going to play a game there. Can you imagine how much those tickets are going to go for?
Oh, yeah. She in her speech, she was like, you guys might want to start saving because it's going to be expensive.
Yeah. I mean, okay. Speaking of games, I thought of this, and it's kind of a ridiculous game to play. Mac Engel going to join us just a couple minutes from now. We'll talk about the Doncic trade and how it might have effect with Indiana. And I'll ask Mac his thoughts on it. He has covered Luka Doncic in Dallas from the time that Doncic arrived. I was watching over the weekend. Of course, the Pro Bowl was this weekend.
Wait, it was?
Mm-hmm.
I had no idea.
And it was a bunch of tag football games.
Did you watch?
No. But I saw video of, and you don't see a lot of video. Well, I guess you do. Marshall Manning, which is Peyton Manning's son. Of course, he's a twin, but, half of a set of fraternal twins. And his son, I believe, is 13 now. And he was throwing passes to Jamar Chase. And I will say he was throwing like pinpoint fades to the corner of the end zone. And you could see the Manning footwork. I mean, it really was like, whoa, yeah, that's definitely Peyton Manning's son. And I sent a tweet that said, and I said it half-heartedly, and it's a moot point now, but I said, this kid should be just a year or so away from playing at Park Tudor, but, well, half jokingly, but half serious, which led to not a debate, but a couple of people pushing back saying, well, wait a minute. Wouldn't he be at Cathedral? Cathedral is the best football school in central Indiana. No, probably in the state. No question. I mean, Center Grove or Carmel would be up there, but in terms of long-standing tradition and certainly knowing how to help and develop players that are Division I and NFL players, undoubtedly Cathedral's done that more than any school in the state. No question. But Peyton Manning, Cooper Manning, Eli Manning, all went to Isidore Newman School in New Orleans, which is a K-12 day school, non-denominationally, and an elite academic institution that is $28,000 a year. When Cooper's son Arch became the number one recruit in the country, Arch Manning played for non-football powerhouse, at least I would assume, but academically inclined, $28,000 per year, wait for it, Isidore Newman, the K-12 non-denominational day school in New Orleans. Peyton Manning, when he lived in Indianapolis, lived at 76th and I think it was 76th and Penn in the Meridian Kessler area. And there's a school over there that you might have heard of that's a non-denominational K-12 day school that's about $27,000 a year called Park Tudor. And their athletic program is the Irsay Family Athletic Annex. And their most recent Division I level player that came out of there was Eric Dungy, whose dad, Tony, was coaching the Colts at the time. Undoubtedly, to me, it's a no-brainer that Marshall Manning would have been at Park Tudor, right? And then somebody said, what about North Central? And I'm like, well, they got to snap their 32-game losing streaks first, right? But Scotty Johnson just walked in. He'd agree with me. Scotty, if Peyton Manning was still living in Indy, was in good graces, had never been released from the Colts, was the face around town. His son is getting ready to play high school football. His son will go to school where? Or Buffer, Park Tudor. Park Tudor is the correct answer, I would think, right? Mac Engel went to North Central, went there with me. He is now writer for the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. Luka Doncic, a lot of people were stunned that he was on his way out of Dallas. I don't know that Mac was. And I think it has a Pacer connection. We'll get to that next. Nice job by Eddie pulling up some Bodines because there is nothing better on a summer night. Hi-Fi Annex, Bodine's out there playing. I've seen it at the Vogue as well. Great summer band. And it feels like summer outside today a little bit. This song, though, is Texas Ride, I believe is the name of the song. And we go to Texas right now, where Mac Engel joins us on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line. He, of course, the writer from the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, who began his career by writing very biased articles about backyard Nerf football games when we were in 7th grade. Named himself MVP for the season 3 years in a row. He's the Derek Schultz of the north side of Indianapolis.
Turn announcer in the fake 500, right?
He was also, yes. Mac, you were also a turn announcer in the fake Indy 500 in 1990. That is correct.
I think I was, Jake. Thanks for bringing that up. When I look back at my award-losing career and career full of highlights, I would say being the turn 3 announcer of a fake IndyCar race on a low-watt radio station is top one or two, silver or gold, you pick.
It was pretty awesome.
Oh, my God. It was amazing.
Although I still think it was rude of you to have made up an accident that I think wiped A.J. Foyt out, but that's cool. All right, Mac, let's get to this. What's that?
Did I really?
Oh, yeah. It was Cheever and Foyt. You had Cheever and Foyt crashing.
Call. Yep, that's right.
Let's get to this news that Luka Doncic, because I think it has a potential Indiana implication. But so many people were like, what in the world happened? And let me tell you what the 1,100 mile away radar would tell me, and you tell me if it's accurate. I'm assuming that Doncic's contract was up at the end of the year and he was eligible for a Supermax. And Dallas just kept looking at the fact that while he is still a fabulous player, that the progression of his non-conditioning was of concern to them, that they finally felt like they could not in good faith invest that much money into it. Your thoughts?
I think you've read it right. I think there's also a thread or two of this that we probably don't know, or at least underestimated. But I would certainly say there was a hesitation to giving him $350 million, which he would have been eligible for and he would have asked for, and I think he would have gotten it had he stayed. By being traded, he's not eligible for that extension now because he's not with the Mavericks. Now he's still eligible for an enormous contract, but not $350. And I would definitely say one of the things that has been a recurring concern that members of the organization, certainly God knows how many announcers, including Reggie Miller, have brought up in the last several years is his conditioning. Jason Kidd, the Mavericks head coach, has brought it up nicely. I mean, they've all brought it up. And he just really hasn't made it a priority. And the best analogy I can think of is that he's a young guy. He's only 25, who doesn't really know that he's not going to be 25 forever. And the injuries and the kind of stuff that he can kind of recover from now at 25, that's not going to happen at 30. And it sure as hell isn't going to happen at 33. So go ahead.
Well, Mac, what's interesting is this. I know that when LeBron James, polarizing figure, I realize, when LeBron went through the summer of the decision, and if you recall, instead of, all these teams were putting together multi-million-dollar pitches on how they were going to, fly in LeBron and wine and dine him and show off their city and whatever else. And then LeBron James says, no, actually, we're just going to go to my office in Akron, and teams can come. And I think it was the Clippers, Knicks, Lakers. There were 5 of them, right? The Heat obviously were one. And in talking to people that were part of those meetings, one of the things that LeBron James told teams was, I have a team here of guys that I pay $1 million a year to that are nothing but my nutritionists, my chefs, and my trainers to keep my body long-term in the best shape that it can be. Now, that's a guy at that time that was around that age. How good an influence, then, could it potentially be for Doncic to go to the Lakers to see that? Is that what he needs as his wake-up epiphany, and is that what he lacked in Dallas?
I would definitely say there was a lot to be desired there. And LeBron, to his credit, I don't think we ever gave LeBron as much credit as he deserves, as much just total verbal showering and verbal bouquets and money. And I don't think we've even come close to recognizing what he's done in terms of durability and high-end production as he's aged. And one of the reasons is because he made his health, nutrition, and body a priority in a way that very few guys do. The only one I can really think of that has that kind of comparison is in tennis, and that's Novak Djokovic. And Novak is 37, and a young man's game, and he's still playing and beating him. So to answer your question, yeah, that could be a great influence. Obviously, they know each other. They're friends. They've got all those kinds of connections. I would think it would be a terrific influence on him. I think the biggest influence on, at least immediately, is going to be a real petty, angry, almost childish backlash at the Mavericks and at their general manager for making this deal. He's mad. And I don't blame him. I don't blame him. But in terms of what Luka needs to evolve and age and mature, I can't think of anybody in the NBA who would be a better influence on him for that specific area of his game other than maybe Nikola Jokic. Because Nikola was really out of shape for the early part of his career until he got serious about it. Now he's unstoppable. And I thought if Luka ever got serious about – I mean, the guy's unstoppable now. But he ever really got serious about that, forget it. There's just no – there'd be no dealing with him.
Mac, is it lack of conditioning based on desire, or does he just have – because, I mean, you and I know guys like this, right, that you love them and you feel for them because they try everything they can and they just can't lose weight. I mean, you and I have mutual friends like that, right? And your heart breaks for them. They try everything and their body just isn't conditioned for it. Is that possible? That's what we're talking about. Yeah,
maybe. I mean, maybe that's just his body type. I don't know. I mean, I do think there is something to be said for that sometimes, that you are fighting uphill against DNA and genetics. But this guy's got a lot of good genes going in the right way. And we have seen him at points where you're like, look at him, you're like, dude, you look amazing. And then at other points, you're like, not only are you 10 pounds overweight, 15 pounds overweight, it looks like every time up and down the floor, you're in labor and about ready to give birth. And you're only 25, or you're only 23, or only 24, whatever it is. I'm like, this is not going to age well unless you clean it up a little bit. But I mean, he is an enormous. I mean, I've been around him a bunch of times. He's an enormous guy, Jake. I mean, he is a big, giant hulk of a man. And some of that is just his body, and some of it too is whatever he is putting in his body is working against him. And he may just have to be a guy who really pays hyper close attention to it, that would allow his body to be at a level that it currently is not right now. And we're talking about an elite, globally successful basketball player. So we're talking about minute changes here. I mean, big changes here that could make significant differences, but ultimately, in a really narrow scope, that would say we're talking about an all-NBA player. I mean, how much better can he get? Well, when you're sitting on that kind of lottery ticket, there's more to be done. And that's why the Mavericks were frustrated with it.
Mac Engel, our guest on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest Line. All right, Mac, let's get to this in terms of how this can impact our audience and the team here in Indiana with the Pacers. Forever, Miles Turner has been linked to the Lakers. Miles Turner's going to there's a guy in L.A. that actually sets a timer on his phone, and every 6 weeks he puts out a tweet at 2 a.m. that says, so – now, all of a sudden, you have Anthony Davis out of there, and the Lakers and Rob Pelinka are saying we need a rim-protecting big. Miles Turner is getting ready to go into free agency. I don't believe in any way, shape, or form that the Pacers will trade Miles Turner. I don't think the Lakers have the assets to make it worth the Pacers trading Miles Turner. However, I guess there's the possibility that Turner could go in and say, I'm going to sign as a free agent with L.A., once my contract's up here. And then that changes things. I don't anticipate that, but that changes things. My question for you, Mac, is this. Do you believe, as the Luka Doncic trade happens now with the Lakers, and it is further illuminated and pointed out, that Doncic is not only losing out on the Supermax, those points have also been made out that he's going to lose an additional, say, $70 million in state and city taxes in California and Los Angeles he did not have to contend with in Texas. Does that cause players to have hesitation about signing free agent contracts in L.A. because it is now being brought to the forefront of attention and conversation, the tax implication in California?
I have talked to and covered professional sports since 2001. And the only reason I'm saying that is because I remember the first contract I talked to a prominent baseball agent, and he brought up the state income tax difference. And he also said his next sentence was, the players never pay attention to it. I've talked to CPAs about it. I've talked to GMs about it. I've talked to owners about it. And that money is real. That state income tax, those city taxes, those entertainment taxes that pro athletes have to pay in California, that's real money. And I'm not talking about, like you mentioned, the numbers. They never, ever pay attention to it unless they're much older and they're not making $500 million contracts. They're making 1.2 or 750, where
right.
those differences really make a difference. Jake, you and I, anybody else would pay attention to that. But those guys on that level, even though they should pay attention to it, they never, ever pay attention to it. They didn't then, and they don't now.
Mac, the other thing is, if Indiana were to get involved, they'd have to get a third team involved, wouldn't they? Which is exactly what Dallas and the Lakers had to do, right? Because Jalen Hood-Schifino is now on his way to Utah, so the former Indiana star gets a chance maybe to kind of a second lease. Sometimes guys get drafted, and it's just not a good fit, and then they get a new spot, and things kind of blossom for them a little bit. But it feels to me, and I realize, Mac, that I'm putting you in the position to talk about two franchises you don't cover per se, but I just don't feel like the Lakers have assets now they could send back that would make Indiana worth their while to trade Miles Turner to them.
Well, when you look, I mean, first of all, Miles Turner's been traded, and I've covered Miles when he was in high school here, and he lived 20 minutes from where I live, and then he went to UT.
Yeah, you know him a little bit, right?
Oh, he was great. Yeah, him and his dad. Yeah, they're wonderful people, and I've really been impressed with what he's done there. The thing that I don't understand, and you and I have chatted about it a couple times, is why Pacers fans want to trade this guy every 5 minutes. I'm like, this is a good player. This is a really good, solid NBA defender.
I'll tell you why, Mac. Here's why. And you know this because you grew up here, right?
Yeah.
We grew up when Reggie Miller was the face of the franchise, and we loved him. I mean, we loved him, right? Yep. And when Reggie Miller retired, this town has thirsted for the next face of the franchise. And, initially it was going to be, say, Artest or Jalen Rose. Then it was going to be probably Danny Granger, but they had some lean years. No fault of Granger's, really good player. And through that rotation, Paul George would be one, then he left. Miles Turner had his turn at the plate where everybody assumed, okay, this is the guy, because he had a really good rookie year. This is the guy. This is going to be the face of it. He has never been that by design. He is an outstanding player at what he does, but he is a complimentary player, not a straw mixing the drink player. And for that reason, I think people felt like he sold them short, when in fact he didn't. It was their expectation. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I would just say, Dallas had that generational face of the franchise player in Dirk Nowitzki, who was beloved universally, and then they draft Luka Doncic, or they trade for Luka Doncic on draft night, and then you're looking at like, oh my God, they found the bridge. They just did what nobody does, and he's going to be the face, and now they traded him. And I think it makes me appreciate, you mentioned Reggie, and I thought about this a lot the last 24 hours, because this area is just in total shock about this. I'm talking like this is Andrew Luck retires type of shock, where you just feel a total stomach punch to your support for that franchise. Like this is going to radically change things. And whereas this situation, Jake, where you would sit there and say we blame management on that one, that was Andrew's own decision because of his health and his long-term quality of life for his future. But in terms of face of the franchise guys, you might only get one, Reggie. I love him for it. You know what I mean? I it's not Luka's fault he got traded, but most of those guys, there's only one of them. There's only a couple of them ever. And Miles Turner, so when you talk about dealing Miles Turner, I like Miles Turner a lot. And I think he's been great for the Pacers. I think he's been great for that community. I don't like the way he's been treated necessarily, and I realize I'm biased. But if he's going to be going to L.A. and you're looking at the Lakers roster, and you got to get something from him, you got to do it. What on that roster fits the Pacers right now? If you say, okay, you want Miles Turner? Great. What we want Austin Reeves? Would they give up Austin Reeves? Yeah, probably. Would they give up Dalton Connect? I'd take him in a minute. Would they give him up? And I don't even know who else is on the team that you would want. They didn't give him up for Luka Doncic, for crying out loud.
Yeah, the problem is too. The problem is for Indiana, if you deal Miles Turner, who you have no bigs. I mean, Thomas Bryant, and he's done a good job in his role. But I mean, outside of that, you got nothing. Everybody's hurt.
That's why I think I would be interested to know what Rick Carlisle thinks about this. You know, obviously they brought him.
What was his relationship with Doncic? Obviously, in the end, it was rough, right?
Rick, I knew Rick. I've known Rick for a long time, and I like Rick. I'm not name dropping here. I liked him a lot, but I understand he's a little bit different guy. And of all the people I've ever had an opportunity to cover, I don't think I ever met any coach who managed up any better than Rick. Rick understood who needed to be told how great they were and how phenomenal they were. Dirk Nowitzki, Mark Cuban, Donnie Nelson. And when Luka Doncic came in, then it was Luka. But if you weren't in that neighborhood and you were beneath Rick and he was managing down, Rick could say some things that could really get under your skin and be hurtful. And he didn't do it to me, but I liked him a lot. But he could do it to people within that organization and to players. And I knew that. I mean, it was reported, and I had known it before, having heard examples of it during his tenure here in Dallas. That bothered Luka a lot. It really did. So I think when Rick left, he left right before he was probably going to get got. So it didn't get too ugly. But I know Rick's got ideas about rosters, and he's not going to take a job. Nobody with that kind of skins on the wall is just going to be a coach and not have influence or input on a roster. And knowing what I know, and remember when he had really good teams here with the Mavericks, Miles Turner, to me, fits what he wants to do defensively around the rim. So if you're going to, like you said, if you're going to give him up, you better get somebody back there who can do kind of what he wants to do. And to me, Miles does that. And I don't see anybody with the Lakers. And the only guy I see on the Mavericks who would do it is the guy they just traded for. Or maybe Daniel Gafford, maybe. But I hope they don't get rid of Turner. But if the Lakers are interested and he wants to go, there's your problem. If he wants to go, well, now you just have to make do with the best you can. And I hope he doesn't.
Mac, when you listed drafted players for the Mavericks that were franchise players, you forgot Steve Alford.
I did forget the great Steve Alford. He had one phenomenal career. I think of more as a warrior. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah. Listen, Mac, I'm not saying I was ate up with my IU fandom, but Steve Alford had a 17-point game one night in Golden State, and the box score hung on my bedroom wall for like 5 years.
It is amazing to me. I had a game on the other night. For some reason, the Nevada game was on, and Steve's still coaching, which is good for him. And it is amazing to me. Sometimes I think about that as someone who grew up there and couldn't figure out why they drafted Reggie Miller over Steve Alford. And it's preposterous. Anybody over the age of, 40, like, are you crazy? But there was that time there where you're like, They drafted Reggie Miller? That's insane. Donnie Walsh should be fired yesterday. Well, turned out okay.
Now, Mac, here's the thing. Since I will ask you to have my back on this, I get routinely, like once a week, people tell me that either I know nothing about or I'm a hater of IU basketball. Can you at least please, you knew me in, 6th grade, 7th grade.
Yeah.
Can you summarize for people like what I was like from the IU standpoint?
Yes. I remember you and I were out with a group of friends from group of friends that we went to North Central High School with, graduated in 91. Or pardon me, when did we graduate? 91, 90? Whenever it was.
Yeah, 91, Mac. That's correct.
91, I can't remember. And one of our friends is a big IU basketball fan, female friend, says, "Oh, Jake's just a hater." And I said, "You've got to be kidding me." I said, do you not remember what he did as a fan when we went to Eastwood Middle School or when we were at North Central High School? That on, dress up as Nerd Day, you dressed up as a Purdue Boilermaker fan.
I did. Yeah.
Nobody loved Bobby Knight, Steve Alford, Dean Garrett, Ricky Callaway. No one took more bullets for Indiana Hoosiers basketball more than you did. And I know it's happened. The same things happen to me. When you're in the business long enough and you see how the sausage is made and all that other stuff, you just take a more, I guess, analytical, cold, callous, even approach and just see it for what it is. It doesn't mean that you don't want to see Indiana basketball succeed. I'm sure you do. But I think anybody who's in their right mind would look at the state of IU basketball and say, these guys suck. They have 20 years. And that doesn't mean you don't like, you got your degree from IU. I mean, you're vested. So to me, anybody who sits there and says, Jake Query hates IU basketball or he's just a hater, bring him my way. I will give them a LinkedIn profile that all it is IU highlights from the time I met you in the 6th grade for however long they were any good, which they stopped being 10 years ago or whatever it was.
Oh, you and I drove a 1971 Ford pickup with no power steering and almost risked our lives to drive to Minneapolis to go see him in the Final Four in '92, from Kansas.
If you would have told me, and I sit here, I'm thinking about this now, people don't know what Indiana basketball meant to Hoosiers in the 80s.
Correct.
I mean, Bob Knight in Indiana gave us a positive national identity. He was our guy, unless you went to Purdue or unless you just hated his behavior, which I can't assault that attitude at all. That meant so much to us. Because the Colts weren't any good. The Pacers were still struggling. The Indy 500 was once a year. But damn it, we had Indiana basketball.
You're right.
It meant so much. And to see them suck now, it makes me sad. For all of our friends and for all my friends and people I know back in Indiana who want to see that point of pride return. And maybe it will one day.
Well, you got it in Purdue now. I mean, I will say Purdue's. There's
another one. Can you imagine that? Purdue flipped the script on Indiana. Did you ever think that we were going to see that in our lifetime?
No, I mean that's.
No, I'm serious.
I know, no, and that's what they are. I mean, that's what they are.
Yeah.
All right, Mac. Lastly, because people around here are interested in it because of the Peyton connection, is Arch Manning staying at Texas, or is he going to make like $10 million a year at Ole Miss?
Nope, he's going to stay at UT. He is. I speak on that with pretty good authority. I know people who know people. I'll drop you. Voices inside the building. That's always very much a thing for people like you and I. He's going to stay. I mean, this has been well thought out. The plan has been. This is not some just fly by night. He went to Texas under the good advice and counsel from his dad, his granddad, his uncle. This was a plan, and he wanted to play under Sarkisian, who's done really, really well with quarterbacks. And the whole idea, the whole plan of it, has gone the way they thought it would. He's a really nice kid, and I suspect he's going to do very well. But no, he's not going to leave. Of all the quarterbacks out there, Jake, can you think of one who needs the money less than Arch Manning?
Yeah, that's right. He, all he has to do is make one appearance on the Manning cast with his two uncles and probably pick up $5 million, right?
No, so he's in. I mean, and he's basically in one of the top 5 programs in the United States right now, and they're rolling. And I suspect he'll do really well and be there for a season or two, and then get drafted, and hopefully have the kind of career that his dad had and his granddad and his uncle.
All right, Mac, appreciate it. I know it's. I assume it's been pretty busy with this Luka Doncic news, and now with welcoming Anthony Davis to Dallas. As well as the ongoing circus that is the Dallas Cowboys as well. So appreciate the time today.
Anytime. It was great talking to you. See you guys.
All right, Mac Engel on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest Line. Yeah, interesting stuff there for certain. We haven't gotten much into the Pacers, by the way, aside from just Miles Turner, but it's a big week for them because they got a chance to collect some stuff that they haven't done in a while. I'll tell you what that is on the other side of Mike Chappell at 2. This from Jimmy Johnson, not from the Cowboys, by the way. Why the hell are you feeding this frenzy on Miles? Miles is not going anywhere. This is as bad as those idiot internet trolls from L.A. who think that we are their farm team. I think, actually, Jimmy, and I do appreciate Jimmy listening and writing that. My point was kind of exactly that. Like, look, I can tell you this. Teams always make trades if they feel it makes their team better. Good executives will tell you, I'm always open to a trade if it makes my team better. Period. Right? And therefore, you never rule out any possibility. But I can tell you with pretty good confidence that amongst players that have played for the Indiana Pacers and amongst the people at the very, very top of the organization, that Miles Turner is amongst their favorite that have ever come through here. I am very, very confident in telling you that Miles Turner is extremely well-liked as a player, as an employee, as a person, as a member of the franchise, as a representative, and most importantly, as an important piece to the way Indiana wants to win basketball games as the Pacers. Miles Turner is critically important to them and very highly thought of. So, yes, I would agree that Miles Turner is not going to be traded. The only thing, before the deadline, the only thing that could change that, and Jimmy, what I said was the fact that I said this at the end of last week. I did not in any way, shape, or form, I think I said specifically on the air, believe me when I tell you this, Indiana is not seeking a trade to ship out Miles Turner. The only thing that changes that, I was at the softball game. Still have the jersey, I think. And the Miles Turner, Paul George Celebrity Charity Softball game. Still have the jersey. Was standing there right on the field. Saw Kevin Pritchard there. And Kevin Pritchard's there, and I walked over and said hi. And Kevin Pritchard's like, yeah, I'm here, supporting Paul George, because we knew that Paul George, the free agency was coming, and he was a rising star. Had made the All-Star game, come back from the injury, all of it, right? Franchise was very clearly developing around, building around Paul George. There was no doubt it was going to be the Indiana Pacers, but there was going to be a little G in between the P and the A on Pacers. And then 2 days later, we get word Paul George is on the trading block, because Paul George right there, right after that softball game with Kevin Pritchard sitting in attendance, went into the Pacers office and said, I don't think I want to resign here. And when Paul George walked in and said, I don't think I want to resign here, they went, well, what do you mean you don't think you want to? And he said, let me rephrase that. I don't want to resign here. I want to go home. Now, he went to Oklahoma City before ultimately he ended up in Los Angeles. But the point being that the Pacers had to deal Paul George and get what they could for him and recoup what they could in order to not save face, but knowing, okay, if this guy is definitively walking out on us, then we've got to get something. So they trade him to Oklahoma City for Victor Oladipo and Domas Sabonis. So ultimately they ended up trading him for Karis LeVert and Tyrese Halliburton, basically. And you got good time. I mean, you got good minutes out of both the two guys they got for him. So what I'm saying is that the Pacers have no interest in trading Miles Turner, and I don't believe Miles Turner has any interest in leaving here, except for this. Is there the possibility that Miles Turner looks now at the fact that the Los Angeles Lakers, it's one thing to say Miles Turner's not going to the Lakers because of the fact they have Anthony Davis. He's not going to play like some sort of a power forward position per se. The rim protection is being taken care of by Anthony Davis. So you always had that in the back of your mind where you're like, yeah, I mean, he's not going to come here or he's not going to go there. Why would he go there? And I have never, let me be very clear here, I have never once gotten any indication, nor heard or read, and I'm sure somebody could send it to me if I'm wrong, but I don't ever remember hearing Miles Turner say that he wanted to go or had a preference to play for the Lakers. However, yeah, but that's Jimmy is right in the fact that there's Jimmy Johnson here on the Expos Twitter is right in the fact that there's always that rumor that comes up, right, about him with the Lakers. But now that Anthony Davis is gone, is it possible that Miles Turner looks at it and goes, to be able to be part of the LeBron swan song and play with Luka and rim protect in La La Land, 70 degrees and sunny every day, that's intriguing. And that sounds like they want to pay me a lot of money because when the general manager is coming out saying, what we need is a rim protector. We need a rim protector that can shoot. We need a big that can protect the rim for us. Well, I provide that. Boom, my cost just went up. I get it. But I don't think that's going to happen. But I think it's worth now looking at least raising one eyebrow going, well, there's a spot there. I do not believe in any way, shape, or form that Miles Turner, though, exercises that and tells the Pacers that that's what he's going to do, and the Pacers then trade him because of fear that he's going to go into free agency. In addition to that, I think even if he doesn't say that, and even if he doesn't have assurance, if the Pacers have not been assured that he's going to re-sign at the end of the year, if he hasn't said one way or the other, then I think then they hold on to him, running the risk that they're going to be able to retain him. Because I think they think that highly of him, and I think there is a trust between Miles Turner and the franchise. I do. And look, I think Turner is – people can jump up and down all they want that he's overrated or this and that. I think Turner is, in terms of what he does, I think he is one of the 2 or 3 most important players on that roster. Now, the Pacers have a chance right now to rack up some things they haven't done in a while. That's frequent flyer miles because they're getting ready to go out west. At Utah, I'm going to name the places here, Eddie. I want you to tell me if you've been to them. You ready?
Okay.
Salt Lake City, Utah.
Nope.
What about the state of Utah?
No.
Okay. Portland, Oregon.
No.
Okay. There's a great little burger place in Portland, by the way, with microbrews.
Thought about going there for a day when we went to Seattle last April.
It's cool. Portland is to Seattle as Indianapolis is to Chicago in all aspects. Los Angeles, California.
Yes.
Okay. So Pacers getting ready to two-step in Los Angeles, but before that they go to Utah and Portland. They are in Utah tonight, correct?
Yes.
And then tomorrow night they are in Portland.
Sega Baba.
Okay. Listen. Nobody says Sega Baba.
I do. And I'm not a nobody, Jake.
But okay, let me ask you something. Sega Baba stands for second game of a back-to-back, right?
Glad you understand it, Jake.
That would be SCOA. That actually is what that would be. So if you want to say they've got a SCOA, fine. Sega Baba, nobody says.
Second game, back-to-back.
Yeah, a SCOA.
Say, GA, game, Baba, back-to-back.
Okay. But interesting because, like Portland, for example, and I'm sure that you could pull up numbers and tell me where I'm wrong, but it feels like Portland's one of those places where they just always it's like a rough place for them to play. I'll bet they win tonight in Utah. Unless Jalen Hood-Schifino comes out and decides that he's going to take things into his own hands. The new Jazz, Jalen Hood-Schifino. The Jazz are terrible, though. Total rebuild, total restructure. They basically said, we're going to bottom this thing out.
Their last win, I think did they win their last year in Pascal's debut?
In Utah?
No, Portland.
I think they did. Portland and, yes, I think they've won recently in Portland several times. It's just for whatever reason, like the West Coast, it always feels weird.
They lost at Portland. The last time they won at Portland technically was in 21, but that was the pandemic, no fans in the arena season.
Didn't Paul George have a breakout game in Portland one year where
Could've.
it was like year 2, and all of a sudden I remember somebody sending me a text that was like, and it was somebody random that texted me like that I'm not normally getting a text from, like within the organization. It was like, oh my gosh, Paul George is like blowing up right now. And I turned on Boyle. I remember I was driving and it was late at night, and I turned on Boyle, and George had like, he went for 40, I think. And it was like his breakout moment of like, okay, this guy can play. But at any rate,
43.
43 in Portland?
Mm-hmm. And a loss.
What year was that?
2013.
Gosh, it's been that long ago.
He had 43 of the 80 points.
The fact that is 11 years ago. 12 years ago, a dozen years ago. And I'm old. I'm definitely old. Pro Bowl, by the way, did you watch any of it, Eddie?
No.
What do they do for the Pro Bowl now? Isn't it just guys standing around in shorts and with flags hanging off of it, throwing the football
Well,
around?
it's the Pro Bowl games now, so they do like a punter challenge, they do a kicker's challenge, they do a quarterback accuracy.
Do you remember the last few years of the Pro Bowl, what a disaster it was? They'd snap the ball and everybody just stood up. Literally, they'd snap the ball and it looked like a cocktail party. Everybody's just standing around like, are we supposed to stand here next to each other? What are we supposed to do?
Do they need to move it and make it in season like all the other sports, professional
No, you
sports?
can't because of the injuries.
Well,
Can you
make
imagine?
you make it like an all-star break. You make it like 2 or 3 weeks off. Make it 3 weeks off, and the Pro Bowl is the game right there in the middle of the 3 weeks off. And if it fills 2 bye weeks for every player.
Yeah, but what does like Jacksonville do? They don't have anybody involved. They all just go on vacation for 3 weeks.
I don't know. It's just an idea.
Okay, here's one for you. Think about this for a second. You ready? Of the 4 sports, which one actually has the all-star game that is the coolest? Think about
talking
that.
about basketball, baseball, hockey, and
MLB,
football.
NHL, NFL, NBA.
Okay.
Jimmy, you're trying to curry or Eddie, you're trying to curry favor, aren't you?
No.
I think you are.
Negative.
I'm still caught up on Jimmy's tweet, which Jimmy Johnson's tweet to me, because I thought it was the former Cowboy coach. If you were to rank the 4 All-Star games, you would rank them how?
Are we talking about the game itself specifically?
Excellent question. Or the whole just environment?
Yes. Because like with the NBA, for example, you've got the dunk contest, three-point shootout, rising stars, skills challenge. Then you have the All-Star
game. I think that the hors d'oeuvres of the NBA are better, right?
Sure. Yes.
The ceremonies, the festivities, the traditions of the NBA All-Star game, can we both agree is number one, right? Or are number one?
Yes.
The dunk contest, as you mentioned, the rising stars, the three-point shootout, all of it. That to me is better than, say, the home run derby. What else does Major League Baseball do?
They just do a home run derby and they have a celebrity softball game.
Okay. The NHL has a bunch of stuff, right?
Oh yeah. I don't know what all the events
skills
are.
Competition, and by the way, the Sabres won 3 in a row. Just so, if anybody wants to get on the bandwagon, my buddies Byron and McConnell are letting me down here. Byron and McConnell, and if you know Mike Byron, this is the guy that forgets his wallet every time we travel anywhere. He's very absent-minded. The guy can't be trusted for anything, right? And he's completely dropped the ball. He bought himself a Sabres T-shirt and acted like he was in the ring of our group text where we decided to pick an NHL team to follow to keep ourselves all in touch with one another and keep the conversation going. Then we're going to go to Buffalo and we're going to go to a game. And Byron's completely dropped the ball on this. McConnell still, I think, watches a little bit. Byron, he doesn't care. But they've won 3 in a row. I think number one, now, if we're going with the weekends themselves, it would be NBA number one, correct?
Yeah.
Number 2 would be MLB?
Yes.
3 would be NHL?
Probably.
4, NFL, right?
The NFL has severely declined in that regard.
It's non-existent. Now, the game itself, the actual game, number 1.
Are you asking me?
Yes.
Boy, it's tough because I enjoy watching hockey and you get all the superstars on the ice.
Okay. I mean, you can put it at number 1 if you want.
I'd probably go MLB, though, number 1.
I would agree. Then you go on NHL 2?
Yes.
NBA 3?
Yes.
And NFL last?
Yes.
The NBA All-Star Game, unpopular opinion, NBA All-Star Game is terribly overrated. I know people that went last year. Was it last year or 2 years ago when it was here?
Last year.
Last season, yeah. I know people that went last season and literally 5 minutes into it were like, this is the most boring thing ever. Like, there's no crowd. It's all corporate. But there's just no – yes, listen, the athleticism that is on display is truly remarkable. I mean, I think we take for granted but the best athleticism in basketball is in a regular NBA game during the game itself when they're trying. The speed, the hand-eye coordination in which that ball moves around is incredible. I mean, it really is remarkable. The All-Star game, I mean, yeah, the cross-court long passes. I mean, what those guys do, athletically speaking, is truly amazing. And it is weird that we become accustomed to it or, yawn through it after, 5 minutes because we've seen, wait a minute, a guy just jumped from 45 feet out and leaped over a 7-foot guy to catch the ball in midair and then go underneath the rim and dunk it. But we just saw that. I was like, what? The Major League Baseball All-Star Game to me is number 1 because of just the tradition of it all. The Midsummer Classic, it's always in a place where the weather's great. I mean, it's summer, so the weather's always good anyway. But just, the beginning of the game being with the sunlight behind them, and then the sun sets and the lights come out, and it's great. I mean, the great moments that have taken place in it. The most famous moment that happened in the Pro Bowl the last 25 years was Peyton Manning calling Mike Vanderjagt a liquored up kicker. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'll deal with it when I get home. I mean, and the thing is, he's a good kicker, Lynn. I mean, we got guys out here, I mean, Vinatieri and these guys are great guys, right? They're getting killed out here now because our idiot kicker got liquored up and ran his mouth. And I like Vanderjagt, and we had him on the show, and he talked about all of that. And I think the thing that bothered him the most was that he wasn't liquored up, right? But that was honestly, that's what is there a bigger Pro Bowl moment that people remember than that? And then the Pro Bowl itself, the game is now just gone all the way around. The most exciting thing to happen this weekend out of the Pro Bowl was the fact that Peyton Manning's kid was out there throwing passes, right? I mean, outside of that, did anybody see anything that took place? Robert Edwards was a running back for the Patriots that blew his knee out playing sand football once at the Pro Bowl. That's pretty much the extent of it.
Winners. Yeah, that's hard to believe, Len. Here we are. I'm out of my third Pro Bowl. I'm about to go in and throw a touchdown to Jerry Rice. We're honoring the Hall of Fame. We're talking about our idiot kicker who got liquored up and ran his mouth off. So, hey, Al, Dan, what has the sports world come to? We're talking about idiot kickers. He has ruined kickers for life.
No, hold on. Pull that back
guys, they've been getting killed all week because our idiot ran his mouth. So when I get home, I'll deal with it. Tony and I talked about it. It's kind of funny, really, when you think about it. Get in. If he is still a teammate, we'll deal with it. That remains to be seen. But the sad thing is, Lynn, he's a good kicker. He's a good kicker, but he's an idiot.
Now, here's the thing. One thing about that clip is Manning, you don't realize it now. I mean, that has to be – it's kind of like if you watch Andy Griffith shows. You watch early Andy Griffith shows, and Andy Griffith has the biggest twang ever, and it kind of goes away. That was Peyton Manning after growing up in New Orleans and then spending 4 years in Knoxville, Tennessee. Yeah, I mean, he still has a drawl, don't get me wrong, but it's not near as pronounced as it is right there. I mean, he sounds like a young buck there, and he sounds like a guy that just spent, obviously 4 years in Tennessee. But that was the biggest. I mean, is there honestly, Eddie, is there a Pro Bowl moment you remember since then?
No.
Marshall Faulk had a record
Sean
at
Taylor?
one point. Oh, yeah, Sean Taylor blew somebody up, right?
Yeah.
It was a punter, wasn't it?
Yes.
Wasn't it?
Yeah.
Some punter. Who was the punter that got blasted by Sean Taylor? Sean Taylor's like, look, we're playing a game. Sean Taylor was a beast, man. Hell of a player.
Brian Moorman.
Mm-hmm. Did he go to BYU?
That was a good one.
Yeah, thanks. I do what I can. At any rate, I still say Major League Baseball #1. No doubt about it. Mike Chappell going to join us coming up just a couple of minutes from now. If you are just joining us on the program today.
Where have you been?
We talked a little Indiana-Purdue earlier. We'll get back into that conversation. And then the Pacers and how they might be affected or not affected by the Luka Doncic trade with the NBA trade deadline. Listen, De'Aaron Fox was dealt as well, which means the Kings at one point had De'Aaron Fox and Halliburton. They chose to stick with Halliburton. They've now dealt both of them.
You mean Fox?
What's that?
They chose to stick with Fox.
Or excuse me, with Fox, yeah. And then they end up they chose to trade Halliburton.
Yeah.
And now they've ended up trading both of them. So and that gets them Zach LaVine. There are always guys too that are in the middle that are just like stuck in the middle of trades. Like that's what I would be if I was an athlete. Just the guy that I've told the story before of
is Jalen Hood-Schifino going to become that guy?
Yeah, they're constantly like throw-ins on trades, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then it kind of derails your career because you play for 5 franchises in 6 years, that kind of thing. I've told the story before of Eric Montross, the late great Eric Montross, when he was, I think he was in Philly or the Nets, but I think it was Philly. And they flew. This is back when teams would still fly. They flew obviously chartered, but they would fly out of commercial airports. And Montross is going up the escalator to go to the level where their flight was taking off out of. And Jerry Stackhouse is coming down the escalator. And he sees Stackhouse, and they kind of and Stackhouse goes, hey, dude, come down to this elevator. We just got traded. And Montross was a throw-in on a Stackhouse trade. So he got up to the top of the escalator, turned around, went back down. Stackhouse at the bottom of the escalator, and he says, what happened? Stackhouse says, oh, dude, we got traded to, I think, Detroit. And, okay, so we got to go down here to this different flight and take off.
Stackhouse now an assistant with Jake?
He was the head coach at Vanderbilt, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is he an assistant at the collegiate level? Don't tell me the college.
No. Professional.
If I had to guess, I would say the Raptors.
No. Western Conference team.
I will say that Jerry Stackhouse, is there a plausible explanation why he would be with this team? He played with everybody. He's a rising coach, right? I mean, he's a well-thought-of coach and well-thought-of guy.
I don't think he played for this franchise growing up or in his career.
Let me ask you this. If I had to move tomorrow to this franchise, would I take my winter coat with me?
No.
I'll go with the Phoenix Suns.
Negative. Golden State Warriors.
Oh, you'd want to take a winter coat there, buddy. You wouldn't think so. Let me tell you something. Those folks in Chinatown in San Francisco are smart. They sell little fleece black zip-ups for like $9 a piece, and it is the gift that keeps on giving, because you go down one of the hills in San Francisco to go down to Chinatown, and the temperature drops from like 60 degrees to like 45 degrees. And you get down there, you're like, I'm freezing. And then they just so happen to be like, oh, we have these all lined up. I've got like
Perkins?
9 of them. Just the zip-up fleeces. I got a bunch of them sitting in my closet. It's like, where did you get all these?
When I think winter jacket, I think like a bulky jacket, that you would wear if it was like 20 outside.
Yeah, you don't need one that big. Well, I see what you're saying. With my question, yes. Yeah, you don't need your Patagonia, your puffer, but you could use yourself a little fleece, right? Mike Chappell going to join us next. Eddie?
Hey, Jude.
If there is one thing that you should thank me for when I'm no longer walking this earth, there are two, actually. One is that I introduced you to Fast Times at Ridgemont High. You would thank me for that, correct?
Yeah, correct.
The other is that inexplicably I introduced you to this song, right?
Yes.
You had never heard Hey Jude until you did this radio program with me, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Arguably the most famous song by the Beatles, the most famous and most influential rock band of all time, right?
Yeah, and this is where you bring in Mike Chappell, and Mike Chappell joins in on
and agrees.
belittling me.
And agrees. No, we won't do that. We've talked plenty of Beatles with Mike Chappell, but he does join us on the program on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest line. Chap, okay, I'll begin with this, Mike. Here's a fun game for you that I threw out earlier today. You ready?
Sure.
I was watching some of the Pro Bowl activity, and Peyton Manning's son Marshall was throwing the ball and already looks, like he's got a pretty good touch. He was thrown to Jamar Chase, and that video kind of went around. The Colts actually are one that sent it out, which I found funny for this reason. I have always said, and I understand it, we don't need to go down the rabbit hole of whether or not the Colts were in the right or wrong to cut Manning and all of that. But had things worked out where Peyton Manning had been able to play the totality of his career and retire in Indianapolis, I think the odds are very high that he still resides in Indianapolis. Knowing that he lived in the Meridian Kessler, Meridian Hills area, knowing that he was himself educated at the Isidore Newman private K-12 school in New Orleans where his brothers and his nephew all played, where would Marshall Manning, in fact, be getting ready to start his high school career if he lived in Indy?
Park Tudor. I'm so far removed from the high school scene.
I think it's Park Tudor because you have the Irsay family athletic complex at Park Tudor. Eric Dungy played at Park Tudor, and it is the closest school to Isidore Newman, right?
Yeah, that sort of. And again, I'm coming from a less than knowledgeable situation because I'm far removed from that, or somewhere up in the Westfield area because that's where all the solid programs are, the Hamilton counties and all that. But no, yeah, I get what you're coming from, and or would he be? No, they wouldn't put him in one of those academies. They wouldn't do that. Yeah, I'd stick with Park Tudor.
Yeah, that would be my thought. But okay, chap, we'll begin with this. Kind of a weird question, I realize, but the Pro Bowl itself, and I get it. I understand why we got to the point where, especially as football has become more physical, it is obviously a huge business. They do the thing where they invite guys out there and they do kind of specialty drills and everything. It doesn't feel to me like that's really taken off and people are totally into it. Are we ultimately going to see a time where you strictly are ceremoniously awarded a quote-unquote Pro Bowl, but there is no actual physical obligation?
I need to see what the ratings are for whatever they showed. I take pride in the fact that I watched 0 seconds of the Pro Bowl games. And again, I was one of those idiots that watched some of the Pro Bowl when they actually still played, non-contact football. So if they draw some kind of an audience, they'll continue to have it because that's what the NFL does. Put their name on it and call it Pro Bowl. But this is probably the one All-Star game that you just can't have because these players are not going to put themselves at risk of injury. And why would you? Why would you? If I'm a player of any, regard, and these are the better players, why would you risk anything? I go back to, God, it's been 20, 30 years ago, and the running back from the Bills, Robert Edwards, I think it was.
Was it Bills or Patriots? Was it Bills or Patriots?
Okay. Yeah. And he played like sand beach football. And I'm not sure if he ever played again.
Correct.
So it's just really hard. So this is kind of what they need to do. If X number of people watch it, they'll continue to have it. I'm one of those X number that's not going to watch it because I've got my life as boring as I am. There has got to be something in my life better than watching flag football or hitting a moving target. I just hope my life doesn't get to the point that's must-see TV for me. I hope I don't get to that point.
Chap, you need to watch Landman. It's on Amazon Prime and Paramount. Have you seen it?
Is that not a spinoff, but that's similar to Yellowstone?
It is the same writer, but it is modern-day Texas. Billy Bob Thornton plays the caretaker of a huge plot of land that has oil tanking fields on it. It's a drama, but it's a very easy-to-follow drama that is somewhat of a comedy because Billy Bob Thornton is just fabulous.
And again, I watched Yellowstone start to finish. hooked my daughter on it, and she's binge watching it. I thought that was really, really done well with complex characters and a couple of wackos. And
That's like that describes every NFL locker room, doesn't it?
Well, anytime you've got a place called the train station where people go and they don't come back from, it's worth watching. But I've been told by a couple of people that the Landman is worth it, and I'll probably get on there when I've got nothing better to do.
Mike Chappell, our guest, Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest Line, CBS 4 and WXIN, where you can read and see his work. All right, Chappell, let's begin with this. In terms of, because we talk so much about our interpretation of the Colts roster and et cetera, let's talk about just from your experience in covering teams from a player standpoint. No uniform rule here, but for the most part, when the season is over for an an NFL franchise, the individual players, their obligation is what in terms of once the season ends? And do most guys then, in other words, are they free the next day to go and we'll see at OTAs, or do they stick around for a while? Do guys stagger it? Is it vacation time right away? Or, how do guys kind of recharge, reset the battery?
I think most of them take whatever time off, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, just to, if nothing else, to recoup the body from 18 weeks of this. Everybody's hurt. Everybody's hurt at some level at the end of the season, so you need those 2 or 3 weeks. And then to some level you start ramping back up. This is not I remember back in the day where guys showed up in training camp and that's when they started getting in shape. We're so far removed from that. So no, they'll start getting back. The hardcore guys who understand that this is a short-term job, whatever that short-term is, 8 years, 10 years, if you're lucky, 15 years. We've talked to DeForest Buckner. He talks about getting back in the lab. And if you live in Indy, the complex is open to you. Now you can't, there's wink, wink, no contact with the team as far as direction. But no, if you take this the right way, whether it's Anthony Richardson, whether it's A.D. Mitchell, whether it's Zaire Franklin, you take some time off but then you get back to business because this is your job. I can only imagine how you prepare every day, Jake. So translate that to the Colts, and you'll see what these guys actually do.
Now wait a minute. Was this was this a speculation as to my preparation or lack thereof? Is that what you're getting at?
I've got a pretty good idea what your preparation is, and I hope these players are more committed to their jobs. How about that?
Wow. Okay.
Was that too heavy of a shot?
Wow. Okay. Let me ask you this, chap. You like music as well, right?
Sure. Selectively.
So down in the Delta of Mississippi, there's an area called the Crossroad. And the Crossroad is believed to be the area where Robert Johnson sold his soul to the devil. And what I mean by that is Robert Johnson was a guy that was a blues musician, went into a club in the Delta in Mississippi, said he wanted to play, dreamed of playing, played, and was terrible, was jeered off the stage, left. Came back 3 years later or so, roughly, asked if he could play again, and got up on the stage and played, and lo and behold, people were suddenly watching before their eyes the greatest blues guitarist that ever lived. And then he died an early death, and people say it's because he sold his soul to the devil. So there's your lesson in blues and Crossroad and Robert Johnson. Having said that, I don't want anybody selling their soul to the devil. I don't want anybody having any sort of an early demise. But if there is a Colt player that is most critical for them after having a year of being jeered or not believed in, not named Anthony Richardson, to come back and then all of a sudden have it all develop right before their very eyes and people go, whoa, something changed. I don't know what, but I like it. That player's who?
Mitchell, A.D. Mitchell. I was going to say Jonathan Taylor because of the one drop touchdown, but he had a fantastic season, so I'm not going to do that. A.D. Mitchell's the one that's really got to take the next step, and it's got to be a pretty significant step. And we talked to him at the end of the season, and he said he needed, or it took him a while to learn how to be a pro, which I think means he didn't understand what the what his first real job entailed. And I think there were times that showed. So he's the one that could experience the biggest jump because, man, he's got talent. He does. And you just wonder if maybe going from college to the pros, the jump was such a culture shock to him that he didn't understand what it took. So I think I'd like to see a big jump from Latu, but totally different because he got it. It just the sheer numbers weren't there. I think he had a pretty good season. Mitchell, I think, is the one, unless there's somebody I'm just way missing. That's an easy one. The non-AR category, it's Mitchell.
With A.D. Mitchell, Chap, I know we've discussed this a lot. Is it naivete of just inexperience in the NFL? I mean, you know, there is precedent for it taking time to click for guys. Or is it immaturity beyond football and just a professional immaturity? What has not clicked?
I think both of what you mentioned, being naive and immature, I think those kind of go hand in hand. And, you know, the way you get that you get past being immature is to play and experience it. So I think that'll come. That's why it's really harsh to say this kid hasn't got a chance. Look what he did. No, I think he's shown some of those flashes, which shows you that, boy, the talent's there. And I think you can learn how to play the position and what it takes. That's why with Richardson, it's so important that he comes back and he's more wired to be the franchise guy. But with Mitchell, I really think that. And again, on the other hand, I've walked in the locker room through my years, and some guys just get it from day one. Manning is the obvious one, but I'm talking the Gerard Powers, Antoine Bethea, Reggie, Edgerrin. It wasn't too big for them. They knew they belonged. They didn't need to play a half a season to know they belonged. And a lot of those guys that I'm talking about were mid-round picks, the Betheas and Powers and all those guys. And when you get those guys, you know you got somebody you're going to have them for a while, hopefully through their second contract. But then some guys don't get it. They do after a year, and then some guys never get it. They just never get it. Ben Banagoo comes to mind. I hate to keep, he's been a guy that people pile on, but he was here for 4 years, and it just never really clicked for whatever reason. Part of it, position fit, I guess, but part of that falls on a player for not doing whatever it takes to make a difference. And boy, they showed incredible patience on a guy with great talent, but just never really hooked up. I've seen other players in the locker room that just, you got the vibe that they were just happy to be there. And boy, if that's your goal, then you're never going to make it. It's the old it factor we've talked about, and some of the guys I mentioned about, you just knew it. They were wired the right way. Maybe you weren't the best player on the team or in offense or defense, but boy, you just knew that they were going to be pretty doggone good. Dominic Rhodes, sort of, Gary Brackett, guys like that. And I think, but with Mitchell, I think this is something, I think he'll grow up. And if he does, they've got a pretty good player, because we saw enough glimpses of him in a very uneven season throwing the football. You know, it's funny, I'm doing something on he and Alec Pierce tomorrow. And Alec Pierce is just, he understood it from the start, was put in a bad situation, quarterback-wise, pass game-wise. But you could just see that he was brought up the right way athletically, and he understood what it took. And I'm hoping Mitchell being around. It's funny, they brought in Mitchell to push Pierce, and Pierce had his best season. Hopefully being around Pierce and Pittman and Downs will have the same impact with Mitchell, because he's got the talent.
Yeah, when you talk about guys, Pierce, I give him credit. Mike Chappell, our guest, I give Alec Pierce credit because he had to block out a lot of noise, right? And he had to just do what he was doing, and obviously it's come together for him, and he's been a nice piece for them. Some guys, it takes a change of scenery, Chap, and maybe there are guys, for example, what do you think is the cause when you see, and I'm going to go back, you mentioned Ben Banigou, I'll go back a little before that even, like Jerry Hughes, who seemingly was cast off here, and you thought, this guy just can't play. Then he goes to Buffalo and turns into a hell of a player. What changes for guys?
It's a good question, and he's a guy that when you're going through that, he came to my mind because he turned out to have a pretty good career.
Yes,
with Buffalo and being a pass rush threat. Never worked here, and I saw he posted a few times. Well, I never got the chance. Yes, he did, and he got a chance as an end, as an outside linebacker in different schemes. I don't know. I don't know if it takes that. It's hey, we're trading you, and if it doesn't work there, then you may not make it. I don't know if that urgency sets in, but in his case, he needed somewhere else. He just did. They could have kept him here, and he probably never would have done what he did after he was out of here. And then in the same token, Tony Hugo, it just never clicked with him, and it never clicked anywhere. And I think injuries impacted him more. But it's just that's why it's such a crapshoot, evaluating talent and then getting the best out of them. Most of the time, teams get the best out of their guys. We've seen the Sam Darnolds and all this go somewhere else and somewhere else again, and finally get in the right situation. And it never would have worked. Never would have worked with the Jets, but it's worked with Minnesota. Maybe it works long term with Minnesota. I don't know. But, yeah, sometimes it takes that shock of, hey, listen, we've given you a chance. And they gave Jerry Hughes a chance. They did. Didn't work out, but good for him that he went somewhere else, and it did work out.
I have a theory, Chap, a Jake Query conspiracy theory that I want you to grade. We're going to sit in Professor Chap's class, and okay. Jake is going to get up and give his little book report on his conspiracy theory, and then I want you to grade it A to F. A being plausible, F being the dumbest thing you've ever heard in your life. You ready?
Okay. Ready?
You mentioned Tony Hugo. Tony Hugo was a second-round pick of the Colts in 2007, and I realize we're going way back here a little bit. But if one were to go back and look historically at 2007, that was around the time when Bill Polian was starting to involve Chris Polian on a greater level within the organization. And when Tony Hugo was selected in the second round, and I think the Colts might have even moved up into the second round to select him, and he was an offensive lineman out of Arkansas, there was a lot of speculation that Tony Hugo was perhaps more of like a fourth-round pick, and the Colts reached on him. But Bill Polian made it very clear to everybody that would listen that Tony Hugo was Chris Polian's discovery, and that Chris Polian was insistent that Tony Hugo was the guy, and thus the Colts decided to move up. It is my theory that Bill Polian was the one that believed in Tony Hugo, that Bill Polian was the one that wanted Tony Hugo, and that Bill Polian was convinced that, like other players that Bill Polian had made a career out of doing so, that he saw a guy that everyone else missed on and took him higher, and then pinned the credit to his son on why they drafted him, fully convinced that Hugo was going to pan out, and thus it would be the final piece of glue he needed to cement that handing everything over to Chris Polian upon his retirement was going to be a well-received move, because Chris Polian had the same draft acumen as his father based on the Tony Hugo selection. Your thoughts?
Well, I was going to agree with you, because I do think that was Chris Polian's pick. I do. I think Howard Mudd may have told that to me at one time. But, boy, to think that Bill Polian threw his son under the bus.
No. I don't mean threw him under the bus. I'm saying the other way around. I think Bill Polian thought, hey, I'm going to draft Tony Hugo, and Tony Hugo people are going to say is a stretch of a pick, but I'm going to say I'm going to promote from the as he's holding up the jersey. As soon as he's announced, I'm going to let everybody know this is Chris's pick, because I'm convinced he's going to be an offensive side Dwight Freeney. He's going to be a guy that 3 years from now people are going to go, what a brilliant pick of Chris Polian. And he just didn't think it was going to not pan out.
That's tough to grade, because I'm still a bit fuzzy on your rationale. because it didn't work. It was a bad pick, and it was Chris's pick, and it was a bad pick. So I can't get past the fact that it was, for my knowledge, Chris's pick, and it was never worked. He was supposed to be the Tariq Glenn guy, I guess, replace Tariq, and when it didn't work, they had to go and get Costanzo. So all I'll do is I'll give you an incomplete because this was a Chris pick. It didn't work. Bill trying to push his son forward, with me knowing that it was a bad pick, I can't connect the two, so you've lost me, which you occasionally lose me, Jake.
Now, part of Bill Polian's undoing was his over-promotion of Chris, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And,
I think so.
I
think Jim Irsay was at his end with Bill Polian at the end. And please, Bill Polian had an incredible run here, almost unmatched with GMs and with sustained success for whatever it was, 10 years, 11 years, 12 years with Peyton. But at the same time, we all knew if you knew how this was going to go, it was going to be ugly when it ended, and it was, because Bill Polian was committed to squeezing every ounce of effort and productivity out of that group, and when it ended, it was going to be a collective thud, and it was.
And to be fair to both men, they now, by all account, at least I have no reason to believe otherwise, completely have, not that they hated one another, but I mean, they've let bygones be bygones and have a very good and respectful relationship, correct?
You're not talking Bill and Chris, you're talking Bill and Jim.
Yeah, Bill and Jim, yeah.
No question. Yeah, again, you do things and it's all complicated, and the two are intertwined, and you throw Tony Dungy in there, and all that success somehow worked. It just, you're talking different personalities. I always thought that the strangest thing is how Bill and Tony worked, because you're talking contrasting personalities.
No
but
question.
They had a singular purpose. They understood their roles. Tony probably more than Bill, their lane, what to stay in. Tony never aspired to be anything more than a elite head coach and all that. So yeah, I think Bill and Jim get along fine. I just think at the end of that tenure, that with all the Peyton Manning stuff, and that's a whole other show of how that ended, and the last couple of months of Peyton being on the active roster, wanting to play, and how it impacted how Bill ran things. That's another story. But you get past that, just like Jimmy has gotten past having to let Peyton Manning go for all the reasons that made perfect sense. Whether or not Peyton's gotten over it as much as Jimmy has, I don't know. I'm guessing no. Peyton holds grudges like few others, which is part of who he is. But I think everybody gets along well as can be when you've got these alphas. I mean, all these are alphas. They're alpha characters, and you're going to have brushes with controversy or disagreements or whatever. And then at the end of the day, you go out and have a nice dinner at St. Elmo's, and you enjoy what you put together.
Chap, before I let you go, I used to do this with our friend and your former colleague Mark Monteith a lot in talking about the Pacers. So I just decided with my creative control that I'm going to invent a new thing each time we talk to you. You ready?
Ready.
I'm going to blast you with a Colt of yesteryear, and you're going to give me like a 30-second reflection on something about the guy. Maybe a funny story or what kind of player he was or how he was acquired or why he was significant or why he was a bust or whatever else. You ready?
Wow. I'd say yes, but not really, but go ahead.
And I'm putting you on the spot, I realize. I'll go with Jesse Hester.
Jesse Hester, he was the wide receiver one. That was Harbaugh's years, wasn't it?
I think that's right.
He and Floyd Turner. Jesse was he had that. What was his phrase? Like, or at the end of the, remember how Freedy had at the end of the day, Jesse had, well, Jesse was a good guy, quiet sort of, but no, I enjoyed Jesse. The Jesse Hester and the Floyd Turner years with Harbaugh, if I'm not mixing up years. How they got him, I don't remember now. You are putting me on the spot, but some guys I would have bad vibes with about, this you guys don't know this, but Jesse was great to be around, a pleasant guy on a team that had very little personality, really, in the mid-'90s, that did almost great things. I've got nothing but great memories, limited memories on the spot about Jesse Hester.
He had come from the Falcons. He had started with the Raiders, then was a Falcon. He was with the Colts from 90 to 93. So right on, you are correct. Right moving into the Harbaugh era. I'm looking at
Floyd Turner. Floyd Turner probably replaced Jesse Hester then.
That's probably right. Yeah, and I'm trying to think of where Jesse Hester was a favorite target, I think, a security blanket in the early years for Jeff George when George got here.
Yes.
And I'm going to look here and see how he was acquired, because with it being Atlanta, it makes you wonder if he would not have been part of, obviously not the George trade, maybe the George trade back out. I'm not sure.
What years was Jesse? 90 to 93?
Correct. So he would have been right in with Jeff. He might have gone out with Jeff, right? Or no, he came from Atlanta. Maybe he was part of the package that brought Jeff here. Yeah,
I'd have to go back. Now you're really testing my faulty memory.
See, usually, here's the thing. This is where you know that I came up with one that was a little more obscure. Usually it has career transactions on their page, and it does not for Jesse Hester. But I'll find it out, and we will answer this hanging in the balance cliffhanger here on The Fan.
Update me on that. There you go.
All right. Chap, I appreciate it. We'll talk to you next week.
Be well.
All right, Mike Chappell on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest Line, indicting right there my preparedness and not knowing how Jesse Hester was acquired. Usually it's right there. When you look at it, it says exactly career transactions, and there's nothing. There's nothing. I mean, come on. He was a good player, though. I think I just might do that. Maybe next time I'll let him know ahead of time who I'm asking about, right?
I think it's more impressive to test the knowledge of Chap to see.
It is. Monteith's the same way. It's incredible. I mean, literally, it's incredible. You could just go, it's unbelievable. The only two things that I can do that about would be, now, and here's the thing. I can do that with Indy 500 winners, probably. I can do it with, like, Final Fours of my lifetime. And then I had this weird stretch where I've told you before, Eddie, I dated 4 girls. Are you ready for this?
Yeah.
I dated 4 girls whose birthdays in order were August 26th, 27th, 28th, and 29th.
You've told me that.
So I used to be able to do it with, like, girls that I dated, but fortunately 29th was the last one and the best one, obviously. But it gets confusing when I go through the rest.
Is that Emily Longnecker you're talking about there?
It's not
your
Emily
wife?
Longnecker, no.
No, your wife?
She's my class. No, but if you Google my wife, yes, it does show Emily. Does it still show that for Emily Longnecker?
Let me look that up.
If you Google Jake Query wife, does it still come up? The first thing is Emily Longnecker?
Jake.
And God love Shannon that she doesn't get upset by this because they're friends. What's it say? Anything?
Let's see, Jake Query wife. Search. There's a new picture. I can't tell who that is.
Really?
Yeah.
Are you being serious?
Yeah.
And you don't know who it is?
No, it's an interview you did. It looks recent.
Let's see. All right, well,
no, it's not.
We'll get to that, and I'll get to career transactions. I'll let you know who the latest wife is. By the way, Jesse Hester was signed as a free agent by the Colts in 1990. So he came in for Jeff George's rookie year and played the years that George was here. So George has told me that Hester was one of his primary receivers when he was there. That band you just heard, we have tickets to give away, correct, Eddie?
Yes. I got a text, Jake. I don't normally get texts during the show from a listener. But Joe, who was in our fantasy football league this year, he says, tell Jake that Billy Bob's wife in Landman is the whipped cream chick from Varsity Blues.
I did know that, actually.
He goes, he will know what Varsity Blues is. You will have no idea.
I did know that.
Which is not true.
Oh, you're familiar with Varsity Blues?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I am. R.I.P. Paul Walker.
By the way,
Tan.
Eddie, you mentioned. Now, I'm going to ask you, we should allow this to be voted upon by our fabulous show listeners.
Okay.
Although I'm going to go ahead and simply say that I'm going to override what the answer would be. Okay?
Okay.
When we did the Fantasy Football League, the gift was a $55 gift card to Lou Malnati's.
55?
$55 gift card to
Very
Lou Malnati's.
specific.
I know. Well, I think it was one of those where it was 50, but you get 10% additional on it, that kind of thing.
Oh.
So it's a $55 gift card to Lou Malnati's, and then you won.
Yeah, I did.
Now, I have the gift card before me, but I believe that the gift card very clearly, and I think you would understand, needs to go to the highest-ranking listener of the Fantasy Football League, as opposed to you who works here. It would seem rather fishy if we had a competition to invite our listeners and then somebody who works at the station ends up winning. That would seem unfair, would it not?
No. Everyone has an equal opportunity chance, Jake.
We should let the listeners, as the judge and jury, decide whether or not it should be the highest finishing listener of the program that wins the gift card to Lou Malnati's and their central Indiana locations, including their wonderful dine-in location in Broderpool, which I love. It's got a great little bar in there, too. Perfect because it's a quaint and cozy place in the wintertime, and it's a very open-air, nice place in the summertime.
Matthew, by the way.
Okay.
Because I beat Matthew in the championship.
So I think Matthew should win the gift card, right? Matthew, who I saw at the IU Indy basketball game against Purdue Fort Wayne a couple weeks ago. Listeners can opine on who should win in this, but I can tell you right now, it's going to be Matthew. Congratulations, Matthew. In terms of, as you had just pointed out, you were incorrect. If you Google my name and wife, there's still the Emily Longnecker's picture. Emily Longnecker pictures still come up, right?
It's Emily Longnecker, Shannon, Emily, Jake, Shannon.
Okay.
I think that's Mottman, and then a diverted flight story with you, and I can't tell who the other two
the
people
diverted
are.
flight story. Well, thank you for allowing me to introduce that, because that happened involving the city of Dallas, which we've talked plenty about today. Luka Doncic on his way out of Dallas, headed to Los Angeles in that trade. We talked about how that may or may not impact the thinking of the Pacers with Miles Turner. But a couple of years ago, when I was leaving an IndyCar race in Dallas, we took off and we were in the air for maybe 20 minutes. And the pilot comes overhead and says, we have a problem with our compass. And so we've got to turn around and go. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I got an iPhone right here. I'll just take it up to the cabin. It tells you exactly where you're going, right? I mean, this isn't difficult. So we had to make an emergency landing in Austin, Texas. And what it turned out to be we thought it was going to be, they said there were really bad storms as well in Texas. There always are in Dallas. And they said, the part that we need is in Dallas, and they're going to fly it over here, but they can't get out of Dallas until the storms leave, and we don't know how long it's going to be. The flight itself was a Dallas to Indianapolis flight. The majority of people on it were coming from the IndyCar race in Texas. But sitting next to me was an older couple, and we just started talking about they were not. I said, did you go to the race? And they said, well, no. And I said, oh, where are you flying from? And they said, well, we connected in Dallas, but we're coming from Fresno. And the woman was talking predominantly.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, oh, no kidding. And she said, but, so you guys were at part of a race? And I said, yes, the IndyCar series, which is the same series as the Indy 500. And she said, oh, my husband drove in the Indy 500. And her husband, who's sitting right next to her. And I said, and who's that? And she said, Bill Vukovich Jr. And I look over and I thought, holy cow, there's the 73, darn near won the race and former Rookie of the Year, Bill Vukovich Jr., whose father was a two-time winner.
See, it's a flex on your IndyCar knowledge from the last segment.
That's right. So we began talking, and I could tell, and I can say this now, only because it's now been publicized, but Bill Vukovich Jr. did pass away about a year and a half ago, and he hit the ailment that ultimately he passed from. He had a form of dementia, and I could tell he was in the early stages of it during that time. But we ended up, IndyCar sent a plane down to get all of us that were on the flight because the flight was canceled and whatever else. So they got us on a different flight, and the IndyCar folks, realizing that it was Bill Vukovich, put he and his wife on the flight as well. And so I rode with the three of them back, and it was wonderful.
Early returns say Eddie won fair and square and should get the gift card.
I don't know. Thinking I'm going to overrule on that. I'm going to overrule on it.
On the 15th picture, when you look up Jake Query wife, by the way, there's some guy. He's wearing a polo. He's got glasses and looks like he's 10 feet shorter than you.
10 feet shorter than me. So he's negative 4 feet.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll look him
You
up.
wouldn't know who that is, do you?
Does he have a beard?
He's got, it looks like a stash, and then he's got like hair here.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's a beard or if it's a bunch of stubble.
That's as we call him, the Connecticut coat tailor. That's what I call him. We have tickets to give away, right, for a concert coming up on June 18th.
That is correct.
Dispatch is going to be at, of course, Everwise Anthem Theater over
the White River State
White
Park.
River, right?
Yep.
So June 18th is the concert for Dispatch. How are we giving those away, Eddie? We doing it next?
We can do it next, or we can do it now. I don't care, Jake.
Give us a call right now at 239-1070. We will do caller number what, Eddie?
It's the first day of the week, so let's play nice. Let's do caller number 3.
Caller number 3, 239-1070. You are on your way June 18th. June 18th to see Dispatch. By the way, 1 hour NFL pick'em over the course of the season. We had neglected to congratulate him on that and let people aware of his triumph. Did we get a winner for the concert tickets, Eddie?
Yes, Justin from Shelbyville won. He said he's a part of the company. He loves the show. And his vote says, I received the gift card.
Well, here's the thing. Justin probably knows that I spent a little time in Shelbyville in my childhood. Country Club Heights, mind you. Sledded down the hill on several occasions at the Elks Country Club across the street. That's why it's known as the Country Club Heights. Spent a little time at Rest Preschool in Shelbyville. Ate a lot at the Cow Palace. Went past the Crystal Flash on a couple of occasions by the train trestle that had a terrible accident at the time that I was living there. My dad worked for Shelby Steel. Tallest building in Shelbyville is the Quarry Building, by the way. So there's a kinship there with a fellow,
humility?
What would have been a Golden Bear. And I can tell you, had I stayed in Shelbyville, I'm fairly confident that in the mid-'80s, I'd have had the most rockin' mullet in Shelby County. But we moved, obviously, to the northeast side where my parents are both Indianapolis natives, and I went to North Central. But I still feel a great kinship and bond with people in Shelbyville. Thus, I would typically agree with Justin.
Do you think your childhood closet would have ended up the same?
No, I can tell you, my childhood closet that has the names of all my school crushes would not have had the same names. Certainly, we know that much. and probably in Shelbyville would have been more so girls writing my name in their closet, right?
Oh, okay.
A little more competitive in North with 4,000 kids. However, unfortunately, I don't think Justin's going to win this battle. I think that we need to give it to a listener. Now, Eddie, here's the thing. This is the kind of guy I am.
Okay.
I'll get you a gift card. But I think
what if Matthew rejects the gift card and says give it to Eddie?
Zero chance. Maybe the two of you could go and have pizza together.
Well, Matthew has been heckling in the YouTube chat in the break room for quite some time, saying that you need to give me my gift card.
Yeah, so Matthew's going to take the gift card.
I don't think Matthew would do that.
Okay. Did you watch the Grammys last night?
Did not watch the Grammys. I did see the...
You froze the video on Kanye West's wife?
I did not freeze the video. I saw the photos and videos on social media.
And they then were not allowed in the Grammys, right? She wore a...
Was not invited, apparently.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they were not invited, apparently.
They just showed up on the red carpet anyway?
To make a statement, I assume.
Well, they did that.
And then some.
I
liked your tweet, by the way.
What's that?
I liked your tweet last night, by the way.
You got a kick out of that?
Uh-huh.
I didn't include the photo on my tweet. I probably shouldn't repeat it on the radio either. But the one thing about the Grammys, it is typically a forum for 3 hours where you get to listen to a reminder of your age. And I did not know many of the performers. Eddie, I would have been curious if you had watched it, how many of the performers you knew. But I'll tell you, I mean, there were several of them. A lot of times when you watch the Grammys, you're like, wait, how did this person win a Grammy? But yesterday, I thought there were some performers that were really good. And I mean, I was like, I mean, obviously they are. They're Grammy winners, right? The one gal, and I'm going to embarrass myself when I say it. She came out, she won, and she gave a speech about the importance of giving artists proper contracts and et cetera. And she had a big hat on. She looked kind of like Glenda the Good Witch from the East. But they played her song when she went out there, and I'm like, well, that woman's got an amazing voice.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoyed it. I enjoyed watching it. And I will say, even though I've never been like attend the concert of or huge everyday listener fan of Lady Gaga, and I realize she's been around for 20 years, but she is a massive talent. I mean, she's a generational level talent. Pacers are in action tonight, by the way, out west. I love the West Coast game. Staying up late, watching them, it's great. They're in Utah taking on the Jazz. This is one, Eddie, that if you're going to go out west for a four-step, which they're going to do, they got Utah tonight, then Portland, and then the two in L.A., seemingly it's a good way to start it by going out and taking on Utah because the Jazz are not very good. A guy that used to coach them, Quinn Snyder, is now in Atlanta. That's who the Pacers defeated over the weekend. And I was worried in that game, Eddie, because Trae Young at one point, early fourth, he hit an open three, and he'd been kind of quiet. until that point.
It'd been ice cold from three specifically.
And then he hit one, and I'm like, yeah, you just don't. A guy like that, you don't want to give him looks because now all of a sudden he's got rhythm, right? And he's starting to feel it a little bit, and he did. I mean, he started warming up a little bit, but, a good win for them. And now they go out to Utah. Again, one of the things that we're going to monitor, and we're going to monitor it for a while, is especially with the trade deadline coming up on Thursday, our Obi Toppin, Aaron Nesmith, I think you're going to hear their names. I would be surprised if Indiana made a seismic move. I would. I'm going to go back to Turner is one that I think only if he goes to the Pacers and says, look, I've just decided I'm going to move on, and I don't want to be here. And I'm not going to re-sign with you. That is the only way in which I think you let Miles Turner move into free, or you trade him. I mean, as opposed to losing him in free agency. And I just do not see that happening. I don't see it happening either.
And even if he does come to Chad Buchanan or Kevin Pritchard or Rick Carlisle and suggest that, then I still think I may be in the minority. I think you still need to write it out, because what's the best way to change someone's mind? Winning. This team made it to the Eastern Conference Finals last year.
And they look like they're
17-5, I think, in their last 22 games, 18-6 in their last 24. So, they are one of the more formidable teams in the Eastern Conference, let alone in the NBA. And if you can convince him by making another run, hey, we're this close. We've made it back-to-back years in the Eastern Conference Finals. If we go into this offseason and we add another piece, we feel like if we retain your services, that we can compete for an NBA championship next year.
Yeah, they are now the 4 seed, right?
Yes.
And
4 games behind New York. They have a game with New York next week.
Yeah, they've got New York as soon as they come back, right?
Yeah, that's their only game. Their only home game left before the All-Star break. They have this 4-game road trip, come home against New York, and then I believe they are at the nation's capital.
Obviously, a big part of it is just staying healthy down the stretch. I mean, that is a huge factor in, obviously, with any team. But the Pacers now are getting healthy at the right time. Whether or not that maintains, I don't know. I mean, that's going to be a big question. James has walked in. James, is J&V here today? John is on location today, so he is, or excuse me, not on remote. He will be in here in just a few. But the rotation that I'm most curious to see what they do down the stretch, and obviously it's something we'll keep an eye on, is I really feel like they've kind of broken through with Jarris Walker. And look, I was down on him at the beginning of the year and was like, guys, I don't know when we go here, but is in fact Jarris Walker, I don't want to say bust, but did they? And then now it's come together where he looks like a really solid rotational piece for them. But is he to me, his ceiling is higher than a Ben Shepherd. His ceiling is, maybe on par with where Obi Toppin is. But the real trick and challenge is now with everybody healthy, does that mean that his minutes go back down where you don't know whether or not you're going to relegate him back down and lose his confidence? Do you break him through? Do you move a couple of pieces that may be there if you want to free up space for a Miles Turner contract? Those are things that we will talk about over the course of the week.
Just had his first DNP against Atlanta.
Yeah.
That was the first time he didn't play in a game this year.
John is here. John, what you got up next?
Somebody got traded there? Are they still trying to trade Miles or
That's
Obi?
right.
Or
Miles Turner and Obi Toppin's names are going to be constant for the next 4 days.
Am I wrong? And I know this is really, really easy for me to do. But you know what? You owe this fan base a little bit of something here. Go into the luxury tax, pay for it.
I think they will.
Let's go in there,
I honestly think
and
they
pay
will.
for it, and stop this scrounging together of pennies from your damn couch cushion and give back to those that have given so much, even through those. Hey, that's very entertaining win bull crap.
No,
I know it's easy for me to say, but that's how I feel.
By the way, you're from this angle where I'm standing and you're sitting down, your hairline looks like Michael Rappaport.
Oh, really? That's what I was going for right here. The Rappaport.
Sure.
Yeah,
right?
The Rappaport right here. Yeah.
All right, John's up next.
Oh, we already done?
We are.
2:54?
54:10 was the clock. We went over.
Oh, 54-10 is the clock over there?
Yell at me. I got reprimanded once today.
Well, better stay on the clock.
That's right.
See ya.
John's up next. We'll be with you until 6. We'll be back with you tomorrow at noon. Thank you for listening to Query & Company.